Minnikin. There was once upon a time a couple of needy folk who lived in a wretched hut in which there was nothing but black want, so they had neither food to eat nor wood to burn. But if they had next to nothing of all else, they had the blessing of God so far as children were concerned, and every year brought them one more. The man was not overpleased at this. He was always going about grumbling and growling, and saying that it seemed to him that there might be such a thing as having too many of these good gifts. So shortly before another baby was born, he went away into the wood for some firewood, saying that he did not want to see the new child. He would hear him quite soon enough when he began to squall for some food. As soon as this baby was born, it began to look about the room. "Ah, my dear mother," said he, "give me some of my brother's old clothes, and food enough for a few days, and I will go out into the world and seek my fortune. For, so far as I can see, you have children enough." "Heaven help thee, my son," said the mother. "That will never do. Thou art still far too little." But the little creature was determined to do it, and begged and prayed so long that the mother was forced to let him have some old rags and tie up a little food for him, and then gaily and happily he went out into the world. But almost before he was out of the house, another boy was born, and he too looked about him, and said, "Ah, my dear mother, give me some of my brother's old clothes and food for some days, and then I will go out into the world and find my twin brother. For you have children enough." "Heaven help thee, little creature, thou art far too little for that," said the woman. "It would never do." But she spoke to no purpose, for the boy begged and prayed until he had got some old rags and a bundle of provisions, and then he set out manfully into the world to find his twin brother. When the younger had walked for some time, he caught sight of his brother a short distance in front of him, and called to him and bade him to stop. "Wait a minute," he said. "You are walking as if for a wager, but you ought to have stayed to see your younger brother before you hurried off into the world." So the elder stood still and looked back, and when the younger had got up to him and had told him that he was his brother, he said, "But now let us sit down and see what kind of food our mother has given us." And that they did. When they had walked on a little farther, they came to a brook which ran through a green meadow, and there the younger said that they ought to christen each other. "As we had to make such haste, and had no time to do it at home, we may as well do it here," said he. "What will you be called?" asked the elder. "I will be called Minnikin," answered the second. "And you, what will you be called?" "I will be called King Pippin," answered the elder. They christened each other and then went onwards. When they had walked for some time, they came to a crossway, and there they agreed to part, and each take his own road. This they did, but no sooner had they walked a short distance than they met again. So they parted once more, and each took his own road, but in a very short time the same thing happened again. They met each other before they were at all aware, and so it happened the third time also. Then they arranged with each other that each should choose his own quarter, and one should go east and the other west. "But if ever you fall into any need or trouble," said the elder, "call me thrice, and I will come and help you. Only you must not call me until you are in the utmost need." "In that case we shall not see each other for some time," said Minnikin. So they bade farewell to each other, and Minnikin went east and King Pippin went west. When Minnikin had walked a long way alone, he met an old, crook-backed hag, who had only one eye. Minnikin stole it. "Oh, oh!" cried the old hag, "what has become of my eye?" "What will you give me to get your eye back?" said Minnikin. "I will give thee a sword, which is such a sword that it can conquer a whole army." "Let it be ever so great," replied the woman. "Let me have it." "Then," said Minnikin, "the old hag gave him the sword, so she got her eye back. Then Minnikin went onwards, and when he had wandered on for some time, he again met an old, crook-backed hag who had only one eye. Minnikin stole it before she was aware. "Oh, oh, what has become of my eye?" cried the old hag. "What will you give me to get your eye back?" said Minnikin. "I will give thee a ship which can sail over fresh water and salt water, over high hills and deep dales," answered the old woman. "Let me have it then," said Minnikin. So the old woman gave him a little bit of a ship which was no bigger than he could put in his pocket, and then she got her eye back, and she went her way, and Minnikin his. When he had walked on for a long time, he met for the third time an old, crook-backed hag who had only one eye. This eye also Minnikin stole, and when the woman screamed and lamented and asked what had become of her eye, Minnikin said, "What will you give me to get your eye back? I will give thee the art to brew 100 lasts of malt in one brewing." So, for teaching that art, the old hag got her eye back, and they both went away by different roads. But when Minnikin had walked a short distance, it seemed to him that it might be worth while to see what his ship could do. So he took it out of his pocket, and first he put one foot into it, and then the other. And no sooner had he put one foot into the ship than it became much larger, and when he set the other foot into it, it grew as large as ships that sail on the sea. Then Minnikin said, "Now go over fresh water and salt water, over high hills and deep dales, and do not stop until thou comest to the king's palace." And in an instant the ship went away as swiftly as any bird in the air till it got just below the king's palace, and there it stood still. From the windows of the king's palace many persons had seen Minnikin come sailing thither, and had stood to watch him, and they were all so astounded that they ran down to see what manner of man this could be, who came sailing in a ship through the air. But while they were running down from the king's palace, Minnikin had got out of the ship, and had put it in his pocket again. For the moment he got out of it, it once more became as small as it had been when he got it from the old woman. And those who came from the king's palace could see nothing but a ragged little boy who was standing down by the seashore. The king asked where he had come from, but the boy said he did not know, nor yet could he tell them how he had got there. But he begged very earnestly and prettily for a place in the king's palace. If there was nothing else for him to do, he said he would fetch wood and water for the kitchen maid, and that he obtained leave to do. When Minnikin went up to the king's palace, he saw that everything there was hung with black, both outside and inside, from the bottom to the top. So he asked the kitchen maid what that meant. "Oh, I will tell you that," answered the kitchen maid. "The king's daughter was long ago promised away to 3 trolls, and next Thursday evening one of them is to come to fetch her. Ritter Red has said that he will be able to set her free, but who knows whether he will be able to do it, so you may easily imagine what grief and distress we are in here." So, when Thursday evening came, Ritter Red accompanied the princess to the seashore, for there she was to meet the troll, and Ritter Red was to stay with her and protect her. He, however, was very unlikely to do the troll much injury, for no sooner had the princess seated herself by the seashore than Ritter Red climbed up into a great tree which was standing there, and hid himself as well as he could among the branches. The princess wept and begged him most earnestly not to go and leave her, but Ritter Red did not concern himself about that. "It is better that one should die than 2, said he. In the meantime, Minnikin begged the kitchen maid very prettily to give him leave to go down to the strand for a short time. "Oh, what could you do down at the strand?" said the kitchen maid. "You have nothing to do there." "Oh, yes, my dear, just let me go," said Minnikin. "I should so like to go and amuse myself with the other children." "Well, well, go then," said the kitchen maid. "But don't let me find you staying there over the time when the pan has to be set on the fire for supper, and the roast put on the spit. And mind you bring back a good big armful of wood for the kitchen." Minnikin promised this and ran down to the seashore. Just as he got to the place where the king's daughter was sitting, the troll came rushing up with a great whistling and whirring, and he was so big and stout that he was terrible to see, and he had 5 heads. "Fire!" screeched the troll. "Fire yourself," said Minnikin. "Can you fight?" roared the troll. "If not, I can learn," said Minnikin. So the troll struck at him with a great thick iron bar which he had in his fist, till the sods flew 5 yards up into the air. "Fie," said Minnikin. "That was not much of a blow. Now you shall see one of mine." So he grasped the sword which he had got from the old crook-backed woman, and slashed at the troll so that all 5 heads went flying away over the sands. When the princess saw that she was delivered, she was so delighted that she did not know what she was doing, and skipped and danced. "Come and sleep a bit with your head in my lap," she said to Minnikin, and as he slept she put a golden dress on him. But when Ritter Red saw that there was no longer any danger afoot, he lost no time in creeping down from the tree. He then threatened the princess, until at length she was forced to promise to say that it was he who had rescued her, for he told her that if she did not, he would kill her. Then he took the troll's lungs and tongue and put them in his pocket-handkerchief, and led the princess back to the king's palace. And whatsoever had been lacking to him in the way of honour before was lacking no longer, for the king did not know how to exalt him enough, and always set him on his own right hand at table. As for Minnikin, first he went out on the troll's ship and took a great quantity of gold and silver hoops away with him, and then he trotted back to the king's palace. When the kitchen maid caught sight of all this gold and silver, she was quite amazed, and said, "My dear friend Minnikin, where have you got all that from?" For she was half afraid that he had not come by it honestly. "Oh," answered Minnikin, "I have been home a while, and these hoops had fallen off some of our buckets, so I brought them away with me. For you." So when the kitchen maid heard that they were for her, she asked no more questions about the matter. She thanked Minnikin, and everything was right again at once. Next Thursday evening all went just the same, and everyone was full of grief and affliction. But Ritter Red said that he had been able to deliver the king's daughter from one troll, so that he could very easily deliver her from another, and he led her down to the seashore. But he did not do much harm to this troll either, for when the time came when the troll might be expected, he said, as he had said before, "It is better that one should die than 2, and then climbed up into the tree again. Minnikin once more begged the cook's leave to go down to the seashore for a short time. "Oh, what can you do there?" said the cook. "My dear, do let me go," said Minnikin. "I should so like to go down there and amuse myself a little with the other children." So this time also she said that he should have leave to go, but he must first promise that he would be back by the time the joint was turned, and that he would bring a great armful of wood with him. No sooner had Minnikin got down to the strand than the troll came rushing along with a great whistling and whirring, and he was twice as big as the first troll, and he had 10 heads. "Fire!" shrieked the troll. "Fire yourself," said Minnikin. "Can you fight?" roared the troll. "If not, I can learn," said Minnikin. So the troll struck at him with his iron club, which was still bigger than that which the first troll had had, so that the earth flew 10 yards up in the air. "Fie!" said Minnikin. "That was not much of a blow. Now you shall see one of my blows." Then he grasped his sword and struck at the troll, so that all his 10 heads danced away over the sands. And again the king's daughter said to him, Sleep a while on my lap." And while Minnikin lay there, she drew some silver raiment over him. As soon as Ritter Red saw that there was no longer any danger afoot, he crept down from the tree and threatened the princess, until at last she was again forced to promise to say that it was he who had rescued her. After which he took the tongue and the lungs of the troll and put them in his handkerchief, and then he conducted the princess back to the palace. There was joy and gladness in the palace, as may be imagined, and the king did not know how to show enough honor and respect to Ritter Red. Minnikin, however, took home with him an armful of gold and silver hoops from the troll's ship. When he came back to the king's palace, the kitchen maid clapped her hands and wondered where he could have got all that gold and silver. But Minnikin answered that he had been home for a short time, and that it was only the hoops which had fallen off some pails, and that he had brought them away for the kitchen maid. When the third Thursday evening came, everything happened exactly as it had happened on the two former occasions. Everything in the king's palace was hung with black, and everyone was sorrowful and distressed. But Ritter Red said that he did not think that they had much reason to be afraid. He had delivered the king's daughter from two trolls, so he could easily deliver her from the third as well. He led her down to the strand. But when the time drew near for the troll to come, he climbed up into the tree again and hid himself. The princess wept and entreated him to stay, but all to no purpose. He stuck to his old speech. It is better that one life should be lost than two. This evening also, Minnikin begged for leave to go down to the seashore. "Oh, what can you do there?" answered the kitchen maid. However, he begged until at last he got leave to go. But he was forced to promise that he would be back again in the kitchen when the roast had to be turned. Almost immediately after he had got down to the seashore, the troll came with a great whizzing and whirring, and he was much, much bigger than either of the two former ones, and he had 15 heads. "Fire!" roared the troll. "Fire yourself," said Minnikin. "Can you fight?" screamed the troll. "If not, I can learn," said Minnikin. "I will teach you," yelled the troll, and struck at him with his iron club so that the earth flew up 15 yards high into the air. "Fie!" said Minnikin. "That was not much of a blow. Now I will let you see one of my blows." So saying, he grasped his sword and cut at the troll in such a way that all his 15 heads danced away over the sands. Then the princess was delivered, and she thanked Minnikin and blessed him for saving her. "Sleep a while now on my lap," said she, and while he lay there she put a garment of brass upon him. "But now, how shall we have it made known that it was you who saved me?" said the king's daughter. "That I will tell you," answered Minnikin. "When Ritter Red has taken you home again and given out that it was he who rescued you, he will, as you know, have you to wife and half the kingdom. But when they ask you on your wedding day whom you will have to be your cupbearer, you must say, 'I will have the ragged boy who is in the kitchen, and carries wood and water for the kitchen maid. And when I am filling your cups for you, I will spill a drop upon his plate, but none upon yours. And then he will be angry and strike me, and this will take place thrice. But the third time you must say, Shame on you thus to smite the beloved of mine heart. It is he who delivered me from the troll, and he is the one whom I will have." Then Minnikin ran back to the king's palace as he had done before, but first he went on board the troll's ship and took a great quantity of gold and silver and other precious things, and out of these he once more gave to the kitchen maid a whole armful of gold and silver hoops. No sooner did Ritter Red see that all danger was over than he crept down from the tree and threatened the king's daughter till he made her promise to say that he had rescued her. Then he conducted her back to the king's palace, And if honour enough had not been done him before, it was certainly done now, for the king had no other thought than how to make much of the man who had saved his daughter from the 3 trolls, and it was settled then that Ritter Red should marry her and receive half the kingdom. On the wedding day, however, the princess begged that she might have the little boy who was in the kitchen, and carried wood and water for the kitchen maid to fill the wine cups at the wedding feast. "Oh, what can you want with that dirty, ragged boy in here?" said Ritter Red. But the princess said that she insisted on having him as cupbearer and would have no one else, and at last she got leave, and then everything was done as had been agreed on between the princess and Minnikin. He spilt a drop on Ritter Red's plate, but none upon hers, and each time that he did it, Ritter Red fell into a rage and struck him. At the first blow, all the ragged garments which he had worn in the kitchen fell from off Minnikin. At the second blow, the brass garments fell off, and at the third, the silver raiment, and there he stood in the golden raiment, which was so bright and splendid that light flashed from it. Then the king's daughter said, "Shame on you thus to smite the beloved of my heart. It is he who delivered me from the troll, and he is the one whom I will have." Ritter Red swore that he was the man who had saved her, but the king said, "He who delivered my daughter must have some token in proof of it." So Ritter Red ran off at once for his handkerchief with the lungs and tongue, and Minnikin went and brought all the gold and silver and precious things which he had taken out of the trolls' ships, and they each of them laid these tokens before the king. "He who has such precious things in gold and silver and diamonds," said the king, "must be the one who killed the troll, for such things are not to be had anywhere else." So Ritter Red was thrown into the snake pit, and Minnikin was to have the princess and half the kingdom. One day the king went out walking with Minnikin, and Minnikin asked him if he had never had any other children. "Yes," said the king, "I had another daughter, but the troll carried her away because there was no one who could deliver her. You are going to have one daughter of mine, but if you can set free the other, who has been taken by the troll, you shall willingly have her too, and the other half of the kingdom as well." "I may as well make the attempt," said Minnikin, "but I must have an iron rope which is 500 ells long. And then I must have 500 men with me and provisions for 5 weeks, for I have a long voyage before me." So the king said he should have these things, but the king was afraid that he had no ship large enough to carry them all. "But I have a ship of my own," said Minnikin, and he took the one which the old woman had given him out of his pocket. The king laughed at him, and thought that it was only one of his jokes, but Minnikin begged him just to give him what he had asked for, and then he should see something. Then all that Minnikin had asked for was brought, and first he ordered them to lay the cable in the ship. But there was no one who was able to lift it, and there was only room for 1 or 2 men at a time in the little bit of a ship. Then Minnikin himself took hold of the cable, and laid 1 or 2 links of it into the ship, and as he threw the links into it, the ship grew bigger and bigger, and at last it was so large that the cable and the 500 men and provisions and Minnikin himself had room enough. "Now go over fresh water and salt water, over hill and dale, and do not stop until thou comest to where the king's daughter is," said Minnikin to the ship. And off it went in a moment over land and water till the wind whistled and moaned all round about it. When they had sailed thus a long, long way, the ship stopped short in the middle of the sea. "Ah, now we have got there," said Minnikin. "But how we are to get back again is a very different thing." Then he took the cable and tied one end of it round his body. "Now I must go to the bottom," he said, "but when I give a good jerk to the cable and want to come up again, you must all pull like one man, or there will be an end of all life, both for you and for me." So saying, he sprang into the water, and yellow bubbles rose up all around him. He sank lower and lower, and at last he came to the bottom. There he saw a large hill with a door in it, and in he went. When he had got inside, he found the other princess sitting sewing, but when she saw Minnikin, she clapped her hands. "Ah, heaven be praised!" she cried. "I have not seen a Christian man since I came here." "I have come for you," said Minnikin. "Alas, you will not be able to get me," said the king's daughter. "It is no use even to think of that. If the troll catches sight of you, he will take your life." "You had better tell me about him," said Minnikin. "Where is he gone? It would be amusing to see him." So the king's daughter told Minnikin that the troll was out trying to get hold of someone who could brew 100 lasts of malt at one brewing, for there was to be a feast at the troll's, at which less than that would not be drunk. "I can do that," said Minnikin. "Ah, if only the troll were not so quick-tempered, I might have told him that," answered the princess. "But he is so ill-natured that he will tear you to pieces, I fear, as soon as he comes in. But I will try to find some way of doing it. Can you hide yourself here in the cupboard? And then we will see what happens." Minnikin did this, and almost before he had crept into the cupboard and hidden himself, came the troll. "Huff! What a smell of Christian man's blood!" said the troll. "Yes, a bird flew over the roof with a Christian man's bone in his bill." "And let it fall down our chimney," answered the princess. "I made haste enough to get it away again, but it must be that which smells so, notwithstanding." "Yes, it must be that," said the troll. Then the princess asked if he had got hold of anyone who could brew 100 lasts of malt at one brewing. "No, there is no one who can do it," said the troll. "A short time since there was a man here who said he could do it," said the king's daughter. "How clever you always are," said the troll. "How could you let him go away? You must have known that I was just wanting a man of that kind." "Well, but I didn't let him go after all," said the princess. "But father is so quick-tempered, so I hid him in the cupboard. But if father has not found anyone, then the man is still here." "Let him come in," said the troll. When Minnikin came, the troll asked if it were true that he could brew 100 lasts of malt at one brewing. "Yes," said Minnikin, "it is." "It is well then that I have lighted on thee," said the troll. "Fall to work this very minute, but heaven help thee if thou dost not brew the ale strong." "Oh, it shall taste well," said Minnikin, and at once set himself to work to brew. "But I must have more trolls to help to carry what is wanted," said Minnikin. "These that I have are good for nothing." So he got more, and so many, that there was a swarm of them, and then the brewing went on. When the sweet wort was ready, they were all, as a matter of course, anxious to taste it. First the troll himself, and then the others. But Minnikin had brewed the wort so strong that they all fell down dead like so many flies as soon as they had drunk any of it. At last there was no one left but one wretched old hag who was lying behind the stove. "Oh, poor old creature," said Minnikin. "You shall have a taste of the wort, too, like the rest." So he went away and scooped up a little from the bottom of the brewing vat in a milk pan, and gave it to her, and then he was quit of the whole of them. While Minnikin was now standing there looking about him, he cast his eye on a large chest. This he took and filled it with gold and silver, and then he tied the cable round himself and the princess and the chest, and tugged at the rope with all his might, whereupon his men drew them up safe and sound. As soon as Minnikin had got safely on his ship again, he said, "Now go over salt water and fresh water, over hill and dale, and do not stop until thou comest unto the king's palace." And in a moment the ship went off so fast that the yellow foam rose up all round about it. When those who were in the king's palace saw the ship, they lost no time in going to meet him with song and music, and thus they marched up towards Minnikin with great rejoicings. But the gladdest of all was the king, for now he had got his other daughter back again. But now Minnikin was not happy, for both the princesses wanted to have him, and he wanted to have none other than the one whom he had first saved. And she was the younger. For this cause he was continually walking backwards and forwards, thinking how he could contrive to get her, and yet do nothing that was unkind to her sister. One day, when he was walking about and thinking of this, it came into his mind that if he only had his brother, King Pippin, with him, who was so like himself that no one could distinguish the one from the other, he could let him have the elder princess and half the kingdom. As for himself, he thought, the other half was quite enough. As soon as this thought occurred to him, he went outside the palace and called for King Pippin, but no one came. So he called a second time, and a little louder. But no, still no one came. So Minnikin called for the third time, and with all his might, and there stood his brother by his side. "I told you that you were not to call me unless you were in the utmost need," he said to Minnikin, "and there is not even so much as a midge here who can do you any harm." And with that he gave Minnikin such a blow that he rolled over on the grass. "Shame on you to strike me," said Minnikin. "First have I won one princess and half the kingdom, and then the other princess and the other half of the kingdom. And now, when I was just thinking that I would give you one of the princesses and one of the halves of the kingdom, do you think you have any reason to give me such a blow?" When King Pippin heard that, he begged his brother's pardon, and they were reconciled at once, and became good friends. "Now, as you know," said Minnikin, "we are so like each other that no one can tell one of us from the other. So just change clothes with me and go up to the palace, and then the princesses will think that I am coming in, and the one who kisses you first shall be yours, and I will have the other." For he knew that the elder princess was the stronger, so he could very well guess how things would go. King Pippin at once agreed to this. He changed clothes with his brother and went into the palace. When he entered the princess's apartments, they believed that he was Minnikin, and both of them ran up to him at once, but the elder, who was bigger and stronger, pushed her sister aside, and threw her arms round King Pippin's neck and kissed him, so he got her to wife, and Minnikin the younger sister. It will be easy to understand that 2 weddings took place, and they were so magnificent that they were heard of and talked about all over 7 kingdoms. Mother Holler. Once upon a time there was a widow who had 2 daughters. One of them was pretty and clever, and the other ugly and lazy. But as the ugly one was her own daughter, she liked her far the best of the 2, and the pretty one had to do all the work of the house, and was in fact the regular maid of all work. Every day she had to sit by a well on the high road and spin till her fingers were so sore that they often bled. One day some drops of blood fell on her spindle, so she dipped it into the well meaning to wash it, but, as luck would have it, it dropped from her hand and fell right in. She ran weeping to her stepmother, and told her what had happened, but she scolded her harshly, and was so merciless in her anger that she said, "Well, since you've dropped the spindle down, you must just go after it yourself, and don't let me see your face again until you bring it with you." Then the poor girl returned to the well, and not knowing what she was about, in the despair and misery of her heart, she sprang into the well and sank to the bottom. For a time she lost all consciousness, and when she came to herself again, she was lying in a lovely meadow with the sun shining brightly overhead and 1,000 flowers blooming at her feet. She rose up and wandered through this enchanted place till she came to a baker's oven full of bread, and the bread called out to her as she passed, "Oh, take me out, or I shall be burnt to a cinder. I am quite done enough." So she stepped up quickly to the oven and took out all the loaves one after the other. Then she went on a little farther and came to a tree laden with beautiful rosy-cheeked apples, and as she passed by it called out, "Oh, shake me, shake me. My apples are all quite ripe." She did as she was asked, and shook the tree till the apples fell like rain, and none were left hanging. When she had gathered them all up into a heap, she went on her way again, and came at length to a little house, at the door of which sat an old woman. The old dame had such large teeth that the girl felt frightened and wanted to run away, but the old woman called after her, "What are you afraid of, dear child? Stay with me and be my little maid, and if you do your work well, I will reward you handsomely. But you must be very careful how you make my bed. You must shake it well till the feathers fly. Then people in the world below say it snows, for I am Mother Holler." She spoke so kindly that the girl took heart and agreed readily to enter her service. She did her best to please the old woman, and shook her bed with such a will that the feathers flew about like snowflakes. So she led a very easy life, was never scolded, and lived on the fat of the land. But after she had been some time with Mother Hole, she grew sad and depressed, and at first she hardly knew herself what was the matter. At last she discovered that she was homesick, so she went to Mother Hole and said, "I know I am 1,000 times better off here than I ever was in my life before, but notwithstanding, I have a great longing to go home, in spite of all your kindness to me. I can remain with you no longer, but must return to my own people." "Your desire to go home pleases me," said Mother Holle, "and because you have served me so faithfully, I will show you the way back into the world myself." So she took her by the hand and led her to an open door, and as the girl passed through it, there fell a heavy shower of gold all over her, till she was covered with it from top to toe. "That's a reward for being such a good little maid," said Mother Hall, and she gave her the spindle too, that had fallen into the well. Then she shut the door, and the girl found herself back in the world again, not far from her own house. And when she came to the courtyard, the old hen, who sat on the top of the wall, called out, "Click, clock, clack, our golden maid's come back." Then she went in to her stepmother, and as she had returned covered with gold, she was welcomed home. She proceeded to tell all that had happened to her, and when the mother heard how she had come by her riches, she was most anxious to secure the same luck for her own idle, ugly daughter. So she told her to sit at the well and spin. In order to make her spindle bloody, she stuck her hand into a hedge of thorns and pricked her finger. Then she threw the spindle into the well and jumped in herself after it. Like her sister, she came to the beautiful meadow and followed the same path. When she reached the baker's oven, the bread called out as before, "Oh, take me out, or I shall be burnt to a cinder. I am quite done enough." But the good-for-nothing girl answered, "A pretty joke indeed, just as if I should dirty my hands for you." And on she went. Soon she came to the apple tree, which cried, "Oh, shake me, my apples are all quite ripe." "I'll see myself, father," she replied. "One of them might fall on my head." And so she pursued her way. When she came to Mother Hole's house, she wasn't the least afraid, for she had been warned about her big teeth, and she readily agreed to become her maid. The first day she worked very hard, and did all her mistress told her, for she thought of the gold she would give her. But on the second day she began to be lazy, and on the third she wouldn't even get up in the morning. She didn't make Mother Hole's bed as she ought to have done, and never shook it enough to make the feathers fly. So her mistress soon grew weary of her, and dismissed her, much to the lazy creature's delight. For now, she thought, the shower of golden rain will come. Mother Holle led her to the same door as she had done her sister, but when she passed through it, instead of the gold rain, a kettle full of pitch came showering over her. "That's a reward for your service," said Mother Holle, and she closed the door behind her. So the lazy girl came home all covered with pitch, and when the old hen on the top of the wall saw her, it called out, "Click, cock, clack, our dirty slut's come back." But the pitch remained sticking to her, and never as long as she lived could it be got off. Princess Rosette. Once upon a time there lived a king and queen who had 2 beautiful sons and 1 little daughter, who was so pretty that no one who saw her could help loving her. When it was time for the christening of the princess, the queen, as she always did, sent for all the fairies to be present at the ceremony, and afterwards invited them to a splendid banquet. When it was over, and they were preparing to go away, the queen said to them, "Do not forget your usual good custom. Tell me what is going to happen to Rosette." For that was the name they had given the princess. But the fairies said they had left their book of magic at home, and they would come another day and tell her. "Ah," said the queen, "I know very well what that means. You have nothing good to say, but at least I beg that you will not hide anything from me." So, after a great deal of persuasion, they said, "Madam, we fear that Rosette may be the cause of great misfortunes to her brothers. They may even meet with their death through her. That is all we have been able to foresee about your dear little daughter. We are very sorry to have nothing better to tell you." Then they went away, leaving the queen very sad, so sad that the king noticed it and asked her what was the matter. The queen said that she had been sitting too near the fire, and had burnt all the flax that was upon her distaff. "Oh, is that all?" said the king, and he went up into the garret and brought her down more flax than she could spin in 100 years. But the queen still looked sad, and the king asked her again what was the matter. She answered that she had been walking by the river and had dropped one of her green satin slippers into the water. "Oh, if that's all," said the king, and he sent to all the shoemakers in his kingdom, and they very soon made the queen 10,000 green satin slippers. But still she looked sad. So the king asked her again what was the matter, and this time she answered that in eating her porridge too hastily she had swallowed her wedding ring. But it so happened that the king knew better, for he had the ring himself, and he said, "Oh, you are not telling me the truth, for I have your ring here in my purse." Then the queen was very much ashamed, and she saw that the king was vexed with her. So she told him all that the fairies had predicted about Rosette, and begged him to think how the misfortunes might be prevented. Then it was the king's turn to look sad, and at last he said, "I see no way of saving our sons except by having Rosette's head cut off while she is still little." But the queen cried that she would far rather have her own head cut off, and that he had better think of something else, for she would never consent to such a thing. So they thought and thought, but they could not tell what to do, until at last the queen heard that in a great forest near the castle there was an old hermit who lived in a hollow tree, and that people came from far and near to consult him. So she said, "I had better go and ask his advice. Perhaps he will know what to do to prevent the misfortunes which the fairies foretold." She set out very early the next morning, mounted upon a pretty little white mule, which was shod with solid gold, and 2 of her ladies rode behind her on beautiful horses. When they reached the forest, they dismounted, for the trees grew so thickly that the horses could not pass, and made their way on foot to the hollow tree where the hermit lived. At first, when he saw them coming, he was vexed, for he was not fond of ladies, but when he recognized the queen, he said, "You are welcome, queen. What do you come to ask of me?" Then the queen told him all the fairies had foreseen for Rosette, and asked what she should do, and the hermit answered that she must shut the princess up in a tower and never let her come out of it again. The queen thanked and rewarded him, and hastened back to the castle to tell the king. When he heard the news, he had a great tower built as quickly as possible, and there the princess was shut up, and the king and queen and her 2 brothers went to see her every day, that she might not be dull. The eldest brother was called the Great Prince, and the second the Little Prince. They loved their sister dearly, for she was the sweetest, prettiest princess who was ever seen, and the least little smile from her was worth more than 100 pieces of gold. When Rosette was 15 years old, the Great Prince went to the king and asked if it would not soon be time for her to be married, and the little prince put the same question to the queen. Their majesties were amused at them for thinking of it, but did not make any reply, and soon after both the king and the queen were taken ill and died on the same day. Everybody was sorry, Rosette especially, and all the bells in the kingdom were tolled. Then all the dukes and councillors put the great prince upon a golden throne, and crowned him with a diamond crown, and they all cried, "Long live the king!" And after that there was nothing but feasting and rejoicing. The new king and his brother said to one another, "Now that we are the masters, let us take our sister out of that dull tower which she is so tired of." They had only to go across the garden to reach the tower, which was very high, and stood up in a corner. Rosette was busy at her embroidery, but when she saw her brothers, she got up, and taking the king's hand, cried, "Good morning, dear brother. Now that you are king, please take me out of this dull tower, for I am so tired of it." Then she began to cry. But the king kissed her and told her to dry her tears, as that was just what they had come for, to take her out of the tower and bring her to their beautiful castle. And the prince showed her the pocketful of sugar plums he had brought for her, and said, "Make haste, and let us get away from this ugly tower, and very soon the king will arrange a grand marriage for you." When Rosette saw the beautiful garden, full of fruit and flowers, with green grass and sparkling fountains, she was so astonished that not a word could she say, for she had never in her life seen anything like it before. She looked about her, and ran hither and thither gathering fruit and flowers, and her little dog Frisk, who was bright green all over, and had but one ear, danced before her, crying, "Bow, wow, wow!" and turning head over heels in the most enchanting way. Everybody was amused at Frisk's antics, but all of a sudden he ran away into a little wood, and the princess was following him when, to her great delight, she saw a peacock, who was spreading his tail in the sunshine. Rosette thought she had never seen anything so pretty. She could not take her eyes off him, and there she stood, entranced, until the king and the prince came up and asked what was amusing her so much. She showed them the peacock and asked what it was, and they answered that it was a bird which people sometimes ate. "What?" said the princess. "Do they dare to kill that beautiful creature and eat it? I declare that I will never marry anyone but the king of the peacocks, and when I am queen, I will take very good care that nobody eats any of my subjects." At this the king was very much astonished. "But, little sister," said he, "where shall we find the king of the peacocks?" "Oh, wherever you like, sire," she answered, "but I will never marry anyone else." After this they took Rosette to the beautiful castle, and the peacock was brought with her and told to walk about on the terrace outside her windows, so that she might always see him. And then the ladies of the court came to see the princess, and they brought her beautiful presents, dresses and ribbons and sweetmeats, diamonds and pearls and dolls and embroidered slippers, and she was so well brought up and said, "Thank you," so prettily, and was so gracious that everyone went away delighted with her. Meanwhile, the king and the prince were considering how they should find the king of the peacocks, if there was such a person in the world. And first of all, they had a portrait made of the princess, which was so like her that you really would not have been surprised if it had spoken to you. Then they said to her, "Since you will not marry anyone but the king of the peacocks, we are going out together into the wide world to search for him. If we find him for you, we shall be very glad. In the meantime, mind you take good care of our kingdom." Rosette thanked them for all the trouble they were taking on her account and promised to take great care of the kingdom, and only to amuse herself by looking at the peacock and making Frisk dance while they were away. So they set out and asked everyone they met, "Do you know the king of the peacocks?" But the answer was always, "No, no." Then they went on, so far that no one has ever been farther, and at last they came to the kingdom of the cockchafers. They had never before seen such a number of cockchafers, and the buzzing was so loud that the king was afraid he should be deafened by it. He asked the most distinguished-looking cockchafer they met if he knew where they could find the king of the peacocks. "Sire," replied the cockchafer, "his kingdom is 30,000 leagues from this. You have come the longest way." "And how do you know that?" said the king. "Oh," said the cockchafer, "we all know you very well, since we spend 2 or 3 months in your garden every year." Thereupon the king and the prince made great friends with him, and they all walked arm in arm and dined together. And afterwards the cockchafer showed them all the curiosities of his strange country, where the tiniest green leaf costs a gold piece and more. Then they set out again to finish their journey, and this time, as they knew the way, they were not long upon the road. It was easy to guess that they had come to the right place, for they saw peacocks in every tree, and their cries could be heard a long way off. When they reached the city, they found it full of men and women who were dressed entirely in peacocks' feathers, which were evidently thought prettier than anything else. They soon met the king, who was driving about in a beautiful little golden carriage which glittered with diamonds and was drawn at full speed by 12 peacocks. The king and the prince were delighted to see that the king of the peacocks was as handsome as possible. He had curly golden hair and was very pale, and he wore a crown of peacock's feathers. When he saw Rosette's brothers, he knew at once that they were strangers, and stopping his carriage, he sent for them to speak to him. When they had greeted him, they said, "Sire, we have come from very far away to show you a beautiful portrait." So saying, they drew from their travelling bag the picture of Rosette. The king looked at it in silence a long time, but at last he said, "I could not have believed that there was such a beautiful princess in the world." "Indeed, she is really 100 times as pretty as that," said her brothers. "I think you must be making fun of me," replied the king of the peacocks. "Sire," said the prince, "my brother is a king, like yourself. He is called the king. I am called the prince, and that is the portrait of our sister, the Princess Rosette. We have come to ask if you would like to marry her. She is as good as she is beautiful, and we will give her a bushel of gold pieces for her dowry." "Oh, with all my heart," replied the king, "and I will make her very happy. She shall have whatever she likes, and I shall love her dearly. Only I warn you that if she is not as pretty as you have told me, I will have your heads cut off." "Oh, certainly. We quite agree to that," said the brothers in one breath. "Very well. Off with you into prison, and stay there until the princess arrives," said the king of the peacocks. And the princes were so sure that Rosette was far prettier than her portrait that they went without a murmur. they were very kindly treated, and that they might not feel dull, the king came often to see them. As for Rosette's portrait, that was taken up to the palace, and the king did nothing but gaze at it all day and all night. As the king and the prince had to stay in prison, they sent a letter to the princess telling her to pack up all her treasures as quickly as possible and come to them, as the king of the peacocks was waiting to marry her. But they did not say that they were in prison, for fear of making her uneasy. When Rosette received the letter, she was so delighted that she ran about telling everyone that the king of the peacocks was found, and she was going to marry him. Guns were fired, and fireworks let off. Everyone had as many cakes and sweetmeats as he wanted, and for 3 days everybody who came to see the princess was presented with a slice of bread and jam, a nightingale's egg, and some hippocras. After having thus entertained her friends, she distributed her dolls among them, and left her brother's kingdom to the care of the wisest old men of the city, telling them to take charge of everything, not to spend any money, but save it all up until the king should return, and above all, not to forget to feed her peacock. Then she set out, only taking with her her nurse, and the nurse's daughter, and the little green dog Frisk. They took a boat and put out to sea, carrying with them the bushel of gold pieces, and enough dresses to last the princess 10 years if she wore 2 every day, and they did nothing but laugh and sing. The nurse asked the boatman, "Can you take us? Can you take us to the kingdom of the peacocks?" But he answered, "Oh no! Oh no!" Then she said, "You must take us, you must take us." And he answered, "Very soon, very soon." Then the nurse said, "Will you take us? Will you take us?" And the boatman answered, "Yes, yes." Then she whispered in his ear, "Do you want to make your fortune?" And he said, "Certainly I do." "I can tell you how to get a bag of gold," said she. "I ask nothing better," said the boatman. "Well," said the nurse, "tonight, when the princess is asleep, you must help me to throw her into the sea. And when she is drowned, I will put her beautiful clothes upon my daughter, and we will take her to the king of the peacocks, who will be only too glad to marry her, and as your reward you shall have your boat full of diamonds." The boatman was very much surprised at this proposal, and said, "But what a pity to drown such a pretty princess." However, at last the nurse persuaded him to help her, and when the night came, and the princess was fast asleep as usual, with Frisk curled up on his own cushion at the foot of her bed, the wicked nurse fetched the boatman and her daughter, and between them they picked up the princess, feather bed, mattress, pillows, blankets and all, and threw her into the sea, without even waking her. Now, luckily, the princess's bed was entirely stuffed with phoenix feathers, which are very rare, and have the property of always floating upon water. So Rosette went on swimming about as if she had been in a boat. After a little while she began to feel very cold, and turned round so often that she woke Frisk, who started up, and, having a very good nose, smelt the soles and herrings so close to him that he began to bark. He barked so long and so loud that he woke all the other fish, who came swimming up round the princess's bed and poking at it with their great heads. "As for her," she said to herself, "how our boat does rock upon the water! I am really glad that I am not often as uncomfortable as I have been tonight." The wicked nurse and the boatman, who were by this time quite a long way off, heard Frisk barking, and said to each other, "That horrid little animal and his mistress are drinking our health in sea-water now. Let us make haste to land, for we must be quite near the city of the king of the peacocks." The king had sent 100 carriages to meet them, drawn by every kind of strange animal. There were lions, bears, wolves, stags, horses, buffaloes, eagles, and peacocks. The carriage intended for the Princess Rosette had 6 blue monkeys, which could turn somersaults and dance on a tight rope, and do many other charming tricks. Their harness was all of crimson velvet with gold buckles, and behind the carriage walked 60 beautiful ladies chosen by the king to wait upon Rosette and amuse her. The nurse had taken all the pains imaginable to deck out her daughter. She put on her Rosette's prettiest frock and covered her with diamonds from head to foot. But she was so ugly that nothing could make her look nice, and what was worse, she was sulky and ill-tempered and did nothing but grumble all the time. When she stepped from the boat, and the escort sent by the King of the Peacocks caught sight of her, they were so surprised that they could not say a single word. "Now then, look alive," cried the false princess. "If you don't bring me something to eat, I will have all your heads cut off." Then they whispered one to another, "Here's a pretty state of things. She is as wicked as she is ugly. What a bride for our poor king. She certainly was not worth bringing from the other end of the world." But she went on ordering them all about, and for no fault at all would give slaps and pinches to everyone she could reach. As the procession was so long, it advanced but slowly, and the nurse's daughter sat up in her carriage, trying to look like a queen. But the peacocks, who were sitting upon every tree, waiting to salute her, and who had made up their minds to cry, "Long live our beautiful queen!" when they caught sight of the false bride, could not help crying instead, "Oh, how ugly she is!" Which offended her so much that she said to the guards, "Make haste and kill all these insolent peacocks who have dared to insult me." But the peacocks only flew away, laughing at her. The rogue of a boatman, who noticed all this, said softly to the nurse, "This is a bad business for us. Gossip, your daughter ought to have been prettier." But she answered, "Be quiet, stupid, or you will spoil everything." Now they told the king that the princess was approaching. "Well," said he, "did her brothers tell me truly? Is she prettier than her portrait?" "Sire," they answered, "if she were as pretty, that would do very well." "That's true," said the king. "I, for one, shall be quite satisfied if she is. Let us go and meet her." For they knew by the uproar that she had arrived, but they could not tell what all the shouting was about. The king thought he could hear the words, "How ugly she is! How ugly she is!" and he fancied they must refer to some dwarf the princess was bringing with her. It never occurred to him that they could apply to the bride herself. The Princess Rosette's portrait was carried at the head of the procession, and after it walked the king surrounded by his courtiers. He was all impatience to see the lovely princess, but when he caught sight of the nurse's daughter, he was furiously angry and would not advance another step, for she was really ugly enough to have frightened anybody. "What?" he cried. "Have the two rascals who are my prisoners dared to play me such a trick as this? Do they propose that I shall marry this hideous creature? Let her be shut up in my great tower, with her nurse and those who brought her here. And as for them, I will have their heads cut off." Meanwhile, the king and the prince, who knew that their sister must have arrived, had made themselves smart, and sat expecting every minute to be summoned to greet her. So when the gaoler came with soldiers, and carried them down into a black dungeon which swarmed with toads and bats, and where they were up to their necks in water, nobody could have been more surprised and dismayed than they were. "This is a dismal kind of wedding," they said. "What can have happened that we should be treated like this? They must mean to kill us." And this idea annoyed them very much. 3 days passed before they heard any news, and then the king of the peacocks came and berated them through a hole in the wall. "You have called yourselves king and prince," he cried, "to try and make me marry your sister, but you are nothing but beggars, not worth the water you drink. I mean to make short work with you, and the sword is being sharpened that will cut off your heads." "King of the peacocks," answered the king angrily, "you had better take care what you are about. I am as good a king as yourself, and have a splendid kingdom and robes and crowns and plenty of good red gold to do what I like with. You are pleased to jest about having our heads cut off. Perhaps you think we have stolen something from you." At first the king of the peacocks was taken aback by this bold speech, and had half a mind to send them all away together, but his prime minister declared that it would never do to let such a trick as that pass unpunished. Everybody would laugh at him. So the accusation was drawn up against them that they were impostors, and that they had promised the king a beautiful princess in marriage, who, when she arrived, proved to be an ugly peasant girl. This accusation was read to the prisoners, who cried out that they had spoken the truth, that their sister was indeed a princess, more beautiful than the day, and that there was some mystery about all this which they could not fathom. Therefore, they demanded 7 days in which to prove their innocence. The king of the peacocks was so angry that he would hardly even grant them this favour, but at last he was persuaded to do so. While all this was going on at court, let us see what had been happening to the real princess. When the day broke, she and Frisk were equally astonished at finding themselves alone upon the sea, with no boat and no one to help them. The princess cried and cried, until even the fishes were sorry for her. "Alas," she said, "the king of the peacocks must have ordered me to be thrown into the sea, because he had changed his mind and did not want to marry me. But how strange of him, when I should have loved him so much, and we should have been so happy together." And then she cried harder than ever, for she could not help still loving him. So for 2 days they floated up and down the sea, wet and shivering with the cold, and so hungry that when the princess saw some oysters she caught them, and she and Frisk both ate some, though they didn't like them at all. When night came, the princess was so frightened that she said to Frisk, "Oh, do please keep on barking for fear the souls should come and eat us up." Now it happened that they had floated close in to the shore, where a poor old man lived all alone in a little cottage. When he heard Frisk's barking, he thought to himself, "There must have been a shipwreck, for no dogs ever pass that way by any chance." And he went out to see if he could be of any use. He soon saw the princess and Frisk floating up and down, and Rosette, stretching out her hands to him, cried, "Oh, good old man, do save me, or I shall die of cold and hunger." When he heard her cry out so piteously, he was very sorry for her, and ran back into his house to fetch a long boat-hook. Then he waded into the water up to his chin, and after being nearly drowned once or twice, he at last succeeded in getting hold of the princess's bed and dragging it on shore. Rosette and Frisk were joyful enough to find themselves once more on dry land, and the princess thanked the old man heartily. Then, wrapping herself up in her blankets, she daintily picked her way up to the cottage on her little bare feet. There the old man lighted a fire of straw, and then drew from an old box his wife's dress and shoes, which the princess put on, and thus roughly clad looked as charming as possible. And Frisk danced his very best to amuse her. The old man saw that Rosette must be some great lady, for her bed coverings were all of satin and gold. He begged that she would tell him all her history, as she might safely trust him. The princess told him everything, weeping bitterly again at the thought that it was by the king's orders that she had been thrown overboard. "And now, my daughter, what is to be done?" said the old man. "You are a great princess, accustomed to fare daintily, and I have nothing to offer you but black bread and radishes, which will not suit you at all. Shall I go and tell the king of the peacocks that you are here? If he sees you, he will certainly wish to marry you." "Oh, no!" cried Rosette. "He must be wicked, since he tried to drown me. Don't let us tell him. But if you have a little basket, give it to me." The old man gave her a basket, and tying it round Frisk's neck, she said to him, "Go and find out the best cooking pot in the town and bring the contents to me." away went Frisk. And as there was no better dinner cooking in all the town than the king's, he adroitly took the cover off the pot and brought all it contained to the princess, who said, "Now go back to the pantry and bring the best of everything you find there." So Frisk went back and filled his basket with white bread and red wine and every kind of sweetmeat until it was almost too heavy for him to carry. When the king of the peacocks wanted his dinner, there was nothing in the pot and nothing in the pantry. All the courtiers looked at one another in dismay, and the king was terribly cross. "Oh, well," he said, "if there is no dinner, I cannot dine. But take care that plenty of things are roasted for supper." When evening came, the princess said to Frisk, "Go into the town and find out the best kitchen, and bring me all the nicest morsels that are being roasted upon the spit." Frisk did as he was told, and as he knew of no better kitchen than the king's, he went in softly, and when the cook's back was turned, took everything that was upon the spit. As it happened, it was all done to a turn, and looked so good that it made him hungry only to see it. He carried his basket to the princess, who at once sent him back to the pantry to bring all the tarts and sugar plums that had been prepared for the king's supper. The king, as he had had no dinner, was very hungry and wanted his supper early, but when he asked for it, lo and behold, it was all gone, and he had to go to bed half-starved and in a terrible temper. The next day the same thing happened, and the next, so that for 3 days the king got nothing at all to eat, because just when the dinner or the supper was ready to be served, it mysteriously disappeared. At last the Prime Minister began to be afraid that the king would be starved to death, so he resolved to hide himself in some dark corner of the kitchen and never take his eyes off the cooking pot. His surprise was great when he presently saw a little green dog with one ear slip softly into the kitchen, uncover the pot, transfer all its contents to his basket, and run off. The Prime Minister followed hastily, and tracked him all through the town to the cottage of the good old man. Then he ran back to the king, and told him that he had found out where all his dinners and suppers went. The king, who was very much astonished, said he should like to go and see for himself. So he set out, accompanied by the Prime Minister and a guard of archers, and arrived just in time to find the old man and the princess finishing his dinner. The king ordered that they should be seized and bound with ropes, and Frisk also. When they were brought back to the palace, someone told the king, who said, "Today is the last day of the respite granted to those impostors. They shall have their heads cut off at the same time as these stealers of my dinner." Then the old man went down on his knees before the king and begged for time to tell him everything. While he spoke, the king for the first time looked attentively at the princess, because he was sorry to see how she cried. And when he heard the old man saying that her name was Rosette, and that she had been treacherously thrown into the sea, he turned head over heels 3 times without stopping, in spite of being quite weak from hunger, and ran to embrace her and untied the ropes which bound her with his own hands, declaring that he loved her with all his heart. Messengers were sent to bring the princes out of prison, and they came very sadly. Believing that they were to be executed at once, the nurse and her daughter and the boatman were brought also. As soon as they came in, Rosette ran to embrace her brothers, while the traitors threw themselves down before her and begged for mercy. The king and the princess were so happy that they freely forgave them, and as for the good old man, he was splendidly rewarded, and spent the rest of his days in the palace. The king of the peacocks made ample amends to the king and prince for the way in which they had been treated, and did everything in his power to show how sorry he was. The nurse restored to Rosette all her dresses and jewels, and the bushel of gold pieces. The wedding was held at once, and they all lived happily ever after, even to Frisk, who enjoyed the greatest luxury, and never had anything worse than the wing of a partridge for dinner all the rest of his life. Rapunzel. Once upon a time there lived a man and his wife who were very unhappy because they had no children. These good people had a little window at the back of their house, which looked into the most lovely garden, full of all manner of beautiful flowers and vegetables. But the garden was surrounded by a high wall, and no one dared to enter it, for it belonged to a witch of great power, who was feared by the whole world. One day the woman stood at the window overlooking the garden, and saw there a bed full of the finest rampion. The leaves looked so fresh and green that she longed to eat them. The desire grew day by day, and just because she knew she couldn't possibly get any, she pined away and became quite pale and wretched. Then her husband grew alarmed and said, "What ails you, dear wife?" "Oh," she answered, "if I don't get some rampion to eat out of the garden behind the house, I know I shall die." The man, who loved her dearly, thought to himself, "Come, rather than let your wife die, you shall fetch her some rampion, no matter the cost." So at dusk he climbed over the wall into the witch's garden, and, hastily gathering a handful of rampion leaves, he returned with them to his wife. She made them into a salad, which tasted so good that her longing for the forbidden food was greater than ever. If she were to know any peace of mind, there was nothing for it but that her husband should climb over the garden wall again and fetch her some more. So, at dusk, over he got, but when he reached the other side he drew back in terror, for there, standing before him, was the old witch. "How dare you," she said, with a wrathful glance, "climb into my garden and steal my rampion like a common thief? You shall suffer for your foolhardiness." "Oh," he implored, "pardon my presumption. Necessity alone drove me to the deed. My wife saw your rampion from her window, and conceived such a desire for it that she would certainly have died if her wish had not been gratified." Then the witch's anger was a little appeased, and she said, "If it's as you say, you may take as much rampion away with you as you like, but on one condition only, that you give me the child your wife will shortly bring into the world. All shall go well with it, and I will look after it like a mother." The man in his terror agreed to everything she asked, and as soon as the child was born, the witch appeared, and having given it the name of Rapunzel, which is the same as rampion, she carried it off with her. Rapunzel was the most beautiful child under the sun. When she was 12 years old, the witch shut her up in a tower in the middle of a great wood, and the tower had neither stairs nor doors, only high up at the very top a small window. When the old witch wanted to get in, she stood underneath and called out, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your golden hair," for Rapunzel had wonderful long hair, and it was as fine as spun gold. Whenever she heard the witch's voice, she unloosed her plaits and let her hair fall down out of the window about 20 yards below, and the old witch climbed up by it. After they had lived like this for a few years, it happened one day that a prince was riding through the wood and passed by the tower. As he drew near it, he heard someone singing so sweetly that he stood still, spellbound, and listened. It was Rapunzel, in her loneliness, trying to while away the time by letting her sweet voice ring out into the wood. The prince longed to see the owner of the voice, but he sought in vain for a door in the tower. He rode home, but he was so haunted by the song he had heard that he returned every day to the wood and listened. One day, when he was standing thus behind a tree, he saw the old witch approach and heard her call out, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your golden hair." Then Rapunzel let down her plaits, and the witch climbed up by them, "So that's the staircase, is it?" said the prince. "Then I too will climb it and try my luck." So on the following day, at dusk, he went to the foot of the tower and cried, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your golden hair." And as soon as she had let it down, the prince climbed up. At first Rapunzel was terribly frightened when a man came in, for she had never seen one before. But the prince spoke to her so kindly, and told her at once that his heart had been so touched by her singing, that he felt he should know no peace of mind till he had seen her. Very soon Rapunzel forgot her fear, and when he asked her to marry him, she consented at once. "For," she thought, "he is young and handsome, and I'll certainly be happier with him than with the old witch." So she put her hand in his and said, "Yes, I will gladly go with you. Only how am I to get down out of the tower?" "Every time you come to see me, you must bring a skein of silk with you, and I will make a ladder of them, and when it is finished I will climb down by it, and you will take me away on your horse." They arranged that, till the ladder was ready, he was to come to her every evening, because the old woman was with her during the day. The old witch, of course, knew nothing of what was going on, till one day Rapunzel, not thinking of what she was about, turned to the witch and said, "How is it, good mother, that you are so much harder to pull up than the young prince? He is always with me in a moment." "Oh, you wicked child!" cried the witch. "What is this I hear? I thought I had hidden you safely from the whole world, and in spite of it you have managed to deceive me." In her wrath she seized Rapunzel's beautiful hair, wound it round and round her left hand, and then grasping a pair of scissors in her right, snip, snap, off it came, and the beautiful plaits lay on the ground. And worse than this, she was so hard-hearted that she took Rapunzel to a lonely desert place, and there left her to live in loneliness and misery. But on the evening of the day in which she had driven poor Rapunzel away, the witch fastened the plaits on to a hook in the window. And when the prince came and called out, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your golden hair," she let them down, and the prince climbed up as usual. But instead of his beloved Rapunzel, he found the old witch, who fixed her evil glittering eyes on him and cried mockingly, "Ah, ah, you thought to find your lady love, but the pretty bird has flown, and its song is dumb. The cat caught it, and will scratch out your eyes too. Rapunzel is lost to you forever. You will never see her more." The prince was beside himself with grief, and in his despair he jumped right down from the tower, and, though he escaped with his life, the thorns among which he fell pierced his eyes out. Then he wandered, blind and miserable, through the wood, eating nothing but roots and berries, and weeping and lamenting the loss of his lovely bride. So he wandered about for some years, as wretched and unhappy as he could well be, and at last he came to the desert place where Rapunzel was living. Of a sudden he heard a voice which seemed strangely familiar to him. He walked eagerly in the direction of the sound, and when he was quite close, Rapunzel recognized him and fell on his neck and wept. But two of her tears touched his eyes, and in a moment they became quite clear again, and he saw as well as he had ever done. Then he led her to his kingdom, where they were received and welcomed with great joy, and they lived happily ever after. Snowdrop. Once upon a time, in the middle of winter, when the snowflakes were falling like feathers on the earth, a queen sat at a window framed in black ebony and sewed. And as she sewed and gazed out to the white landscape, she pricked her finger with the needle, and 3 drops of blood fell on the snow outside. And because the red showed out so well against the white, she thought to herself, "Oh, what wouldn't I give to have a child as white as snow, as red as blood, and as black as ebony?" And her wish was granted, for not long after a little daughter was born to her, with a skin as white as snow, lips and cheeks as red as blood, and hair as black as ebony. They called her Snowdrop, and not long after her birth, the queen died. After a year, the king married again. His new wife was a beautiful woman, but so proud and overbearing that she couldn't stand any rival to her beauty. She possessed a magic mirror, and when she used to stand before it gazing at her own reflection and ask, "Mirror, mirror, hanging there, who in all the lands most fair?" it always replied, "You are most fair, my lady queen, none fairer in the land, I ween." Then she was quite happy, for she knew the mirror always spoke the truth. But Snowdrop was growing prettier and prettier every day, and when she was 7 years old, she was as beautiful as she could be, and fairer even than the queen herself. One day, when the latter asked her mirror the usual question, it replied, "My lady queen, you are fair, 'tis true, but Snowdrop is fairer far than you." Then the queen flew into the most awful passion, and turned every shade of green in her jealousy. From this hour she hated poor Snowdrop like poison, and every day her envy, hatred, and malice grew. For envy and jealousy are like evil weeds which spring up and choke the heart. At last she could endure Snowdrop's presence no longer, and, calling a huntsman to her, she said, "Take the child out into the wood, and never let me see her face again. You must kill her, and bring me back her lungs and liver, that I may know for certain she is dead." The huntsman did as he was told, and led Snowdrop out into the wood. But as he was in the act of drawing out his knife to slay her, she began to cry, and said, "Oh, dear huntsman, spare my life, and I will promise to fly forth into the wide wood, and never to return home again." And because she was so young and pretty, the huntsman had pity on her, and said, "Well, run along, poor child," for he thought to himself, "The wild beasts will soon eat her up." And his heart felt lighter because he hadn't had to do the deed himself. And as he turned away, a young boar came running past. So he shot it, and brought its lungs and liver home to the queen as a proof that Snowdrop was really dead. And the wicked woman had them stewed in salt and ate them up, thinking she had made an end of Snowdrop forever. Now, when the poor child found herself alone in the big wood, the very trees around her seemed to assume strange shape, and she felt so frightened she didn't know what to do. Then she began to run over the sharp stones and through the bramble bushes, and the wild beasts ran past her. But they did her no harm. She ran as far as her legs would carry her, and as evening approached she saw a little house, and she stepped inside to rest. Everything was very small in the little house, but cleaner and neater than anything you can imagine. In the middle of the room there stood a little table, covered with a white tablecloth, and 7 little plates and forks and spoons and knives and tumblers. Side by side against the wall there were 7 little beds, covered with snow-white counterpanes. Snowdrop felt so hungry and so thirsty that she ate a bit of bread and a little porridge from each plate, and drank a drop of wine out of each tumbler. Then, feeling tired and sleepy, she lay down on one of the beds, but it wasn't comfortable. Then she tried all the others in turn, but one was too long and another too short. And it was only when she got to the 7th that she found one to suit her exactly. So she lay down upon it, said her prayers like a good child, and fell fast asleep. When it got quite dark, the masters of the little house returned. They were 7 dwarfs who worked in the mines, right down deep in the heart of the mountain. They lighted their 7 little lamps, and as soon as their eyes got accustomed to the glare, they saw that someone had been in the room, for all was not in the same order as they had left it. The first said, "Who's been sitting on my little chair?" The second said, "Who's been eating my little loaf?" The third said, "Who's been tasting my porridge?" The fourth said, "Who's been eating out of my little plate?" The fifth said, "Who's been using my little fork?" The sixth said, "Who's been cutting with my little knife?" The seventh said, "Who's been drinking out of my little tumbler?" Then the first dwarf looked round and saw a little hollow in his bed, and he asked again, "Who's been lying on my bed?" The others came running round and cried when they saw their beds, "Somebody has lain on ours too." But when the seventh came to his bed, he started back in amazement, for there he beheld Snowdrop fast asleep. Then he called the others, who turned their little lamps full on the bed, and when they saw Snowdrop lying there, they nearly fell down with surprise. "Goodness gracious!" they cried, "what a beautiful child!" And they were so enchanted by her beauty that they did not wake her, but let her sleep on in the little bed. But the seventh dwarf slept with his companions 1 hour in each bed, and in this way he managed to pass the night. In the morning Snowdrop awoke, but when she saw the 7 little dwarfs she felt very frightened. But they were so friendly, and asked her what her name was in such a kind way, that she replied, "I am Snowdrop." "Why did you come to our house?" continued the dwarfs. Then she told them how her stepmother had wished her put to death, and how the huntsman had spared her life, and how she had run the whole day till she had come to their little house. The dwarfs, when they had heard her sad story, asked her, "Will you stay and keep house for us, cook, make the beds, the washing, sew and knit? And if you give satisfaction and keep everything neat and clean, you shall want for nothing." "Yes," answered Snowdrop, "I will gladly do all you ask." And so she took up her abode with them. Every morning the dwarfs went into the mountain to dig for gold, and in the evening, when they returned home, Snowdrop always had their supper ready for them. But during the day the girl was left quite alone, so the good dwarfs warned her, saying, "Beware of your stepmother. She will soon find out you are here, and whatever you do, don't let anyone into the house." Now the queen, after she thought she had eaten Snowdrop's lungs and liver, never dreamed but that she was once more the most beautiful woman in the world. So stepping before her mirror one day, she said, "Mirror, mirror, hanging there, who in all the land's most fair?" And the mirror replied, "My lady queen, you are fair, 'tis true, but Snowdrop is fairer far than you." "Snowdrop, who dwells with the 7 little men, is as fair as you, as fair again." When the queen heard these words, she was nearly struck dumb with horror, for the mirror always spoke the truth, and she knew now that the huntsman must have deceived her, and that Snowdrop was still alive. She pondered day and night how she might destroy her, for as long as she felt she had a rival in the land, her jealous heart left her no rest. At last she hit upon a plan. She stained her face and dressed herself up as an old peddler wife, so that she was quite unrecognizable. In this guise she went over the 7 hills till she came to the house of the 7 dwarfs. There she knocked at the door, calling out at the same time, "Fine wares to sell, fine wares to sell." Snowdrop peeped out of the window and called out, "Good day, mother, what have you to sell?" "Good wares, fine wares," she answered, "laces of every shade and description." And she held one up that was made of some gay-coloured silk. "Surely I can let the honest woman in," thought Snowdrop, so she unbarred the door and bought the pretty lace. "Good gracious!" "Child," said the old woman, "what a figure you've got! Come, I'll lace you up properly for once." Snowdrop, suspecting no evil, stood before her and let her lace her bodice up. But the old woman laced her so quickly and so tightly that it took Snowdrop's breath away, and she fell down dead. "Now you are no longer the fairest," said the wicked old woman, and then she hastened away. In the evening the 7 dwarfs came home, and you may think what a fright they got when they saw their dear Snowdrop lying on the floor, as still and motionless as a dead person. They lifted her up tenderly, and when they saw how tightly laced she was, they cut the lace in two, and she began to breathe a little, and gradually came back to life. When the dwarfs heard what had happened, they said, "Depend upon it, the old peddler wife was none other than the old queen. In future you must be sure to let no one in if we are not at home." As soon as the wicked old queen got home, she went straight to her mirror and said, "Mirror, mirror, hanging there, who in all the land's most fair?" And the mirror answered as before, "My lady queen, you are fair, 'tis true, but Snowdrop is fairer far than you. Snowdrop, who dwells with the 7 little men, is as fair as you, as fair again." When she heard this, she became as pale as death, because she saw at once that Snowdrop must be alive again. "This time," she said to herself, "I will think of something that will make an end of her once and for all." And by the witchcraft which she understood so well, she made a poisonous comb. Then she dressed herself up and assumed the form of another old woman. So she went over the 7 hills till she reached the house of the 7 dwarfs, and knocking at the door she called out, "Fine wares for sale." Snowdrop looked out of the window and said, "You must go away, for I may not let anyone in." "But surely you are not forbidden to look out," said the old woman, and she held up the poisonous comb for her to see. It pleased the girl so much that she let herself be taken in and opened the door. When they had settled their bargain, the old woman said, "Now I'll comb your hair properly for you, for once in the way." Poor Snowdrop thought no evil, but hardly had the comb touched her hair than the poison worked, and she fell down unconscious. "Now, my fine lady, you're really done for this time," said the wicked woman, and she made her way home as fast as she could. Fortunately, it was now near evening, and the 7 dwarfs returned home. When they saw Snowdrop lying dead on the ground, they at once suspected that her wicked stepmother had been at work again. So they searched till they found the poisonous comb, and the moment they pulled it out of her head, Snowdrop came to herself again and told them what had happened. Then they warned her once more to be on her guard, and to open the door to no one. As soon as the queen got home, she went straight to her mirror and asked, "Mirror, mirror, hanging there, who in all the land's most fair?" And it replied as before, "My lady queen, you are fair, 'tis true, but Snowdrop is fairer far than you." "Snowdrop, who dwells with the 7 little men, is as fair as you, as fair again." When she heard these words, she literally trembled and shook with rage. "Snowdrop shall die," she cried. "Yes, though it cost me my own life." Then she went to a little secret chamber, which no one knew of but herself, and there she made a poisonous apple. Outwardly it looked beautiful, white with red cheeks, so that everyone who saw it longed to eat it, but anyone who might do so would certainly die on the spot. When the apple was quite finished, she stained her face and dressed herself up as a peasant, and so she went over the 7 hills to the 7 dwarfs. She knocked at the door, as usual, but Snowdrop put her head out of the window and called out, "I may not let anyone in. The 7 dwarfs have forbidden me to do so." "Are you afraid of being poisoned?" asked the old woman. "See, I will cut this apple in half. I'll eat the white cheek, and you can eat the red." But the apple was so cunningly made that only the red cheek was poisonous. Snowdrop longed to eat the tempting fruit, and when she saw that the peasant woman was eating it herself, she couldn't resist the temptation any longer, and stretching out her hand, she took the poisonous half. But hardly had the first bite passed her lips than she fell down dead on the ground. Then the eyes of the cruel queen sparkled with glee, and laughing aloud she cried, "As white as snow, as red as blood, and as black as ebony. This time the dwarfs won't be able to bring you back to life." When she got home, she asked the mirror, "Mirror, mirror, hanging there, who in all the land's most fair?" And this time it replied, "You are most fair, my lady queen, none fairer in the land." "I ween." Then her jealous heart was at rest, at least as much at rest as a jealous heart can ever be. When the little dwarfs came home in the evening, they found Snowdrop lying on the ground, and she neither breathed nor stirred. They lifted her up and looked round everywhere to see if they could find anything poisonous about. They unlaced her bodice, combed her hair, washed her with water and wine, but all in vain. The child was dead and remained dead. Then they placed her on a bier, and all the 7 dwarfs sat round it, weeping and sobbing for 3 whole days. At last they made up their minds to bury her, but she looked as blooming as a living being, and her cheeks were still such a lovely colour, that they said, "We can't hide her away in the black ground." So they had a coffin made of transparent glass, and they laid her in it, and wrote on the lid in golden letters that she was a royal princess. Then they put the coffin on the top of the mountain, and one of the dwarfs always remained beside it and kept watch over it. And the very birds of the air came and bewailed Snowdrop's death, first an owl, and then a raven, and last of all a little dove. Snowdrop lay a long time in the coffin, and she always looked the same, just as if she were fast asleep, and she remained as white as snow, as red as blood, and her hair as black as ebony. Now it happened one day that a prince came to the wood and passed by the dwarf's house. He saw the coffin on the hill, with the beautiful Snowdrop inside it, and when he had read what was written on it in golden letters, he said to the dwarf, "Give me the coffin, I'll give you whatever you like for it." But the dwarf said, "No, we wouldn't part with it for all the gold in the world." "Well then," he replied, "give it to me, because I can't live without Snowdrop. I will cherish and love it as my dearest possession." He spoke so sadly that the good dwarfs had pity on him, and gave him the coffin, and the prince made his servants bear it away on their shoulders. Now it happened that as they were going down the hill, they stumbled over a bush, and jolted the coffin so violently that the poisonous bit of apple Snowdrop had swallowed fell out of her throat. She gradually opened her eyes, lifted up the lid of the coffin, and sat up alive and well. "Oh, dear me, where am I?" she cried. The prince answered joyfully, "You are with me." And he told her all that had happened, adding, "I love you better than anyone in the whole wide world. Will you come with me to my father's palace and be my wife?" Snowdrop consented, and went with him, and the marriage was celebrated with great pomp and splendour. Now Snowdrop's wicked stepmother was one of the guests invited to the wedding feast. When she had dressed herself very gorgeously for the occasion, she went to the mirror and said, "Mirror, mirror, hanging there, who in all the land's most fair?" And the mirror answered, "My lady queen, you are fair, 'tis true, but Snowdrop is fairer far than you." When the wicked woman heard these words, she uttered a curse, and was beside herself with rage and mortification. At first she didn't want to go to the wedding at all, but at the same time she felt she would never be happy till she had seen the young queen. As she entered, Snowdrop recognized her and nearly fainted with fear, but red-hot iron shoes had been prepared for the wicked old queen, and she was made to get into them and dance till she fell down dead. Soria, Moria, Castle. There was once upon a time a couple of folks who had a son called Halvor. Ever since he had been a little boy, he had been unwilling to do any work, and had just sat raking about among the ashes. His parents sent him away to learn several things, but Halvor stayed nowhere. For when he had been gone 2 or 3 days, he always ran away from his master, hurried off home, and sat down in the chimney corner to grub among the ashes again. One day, however, a sea captain came and asked Halvor if he hadn't a fancy to come with him and go to sea and behold foreign lands. And Halvor had a fancy for that. So he was not long in getting ready. How long they sailed, I have no idea, but after a long, long time there was a terrible storm, and when it was over, and all had become calm again, they knew not where they were, for they had been driven away to a strange coast of which none of them had any knowledge. As there was no wind at all, they lay there becalmed, and Halvor asked the skipper to give him leave to go on shore to look about him, for he would much rather do that than lie there and sleep. "Dost thou think that thou art fit to go where people can see thee?" said the skipper. "Thou hast no clothes but those rags thou art going about in." Halvor still begged for leave, and at last got it, but he was to come back at once if the wind began to rise. So he went on shore, and it was a delightful country. Whithersoever he went, there were wide plains with fields and meadows, but as for people, there were none to be seen. The wind began to rise, but Halvor thought that he had not seen enough yet, and that he would like to walk about a little longer to try if he could not meet somebody. So, after a while, he came to a great highway, which was so smooth that an egg might have been rolled along it without breaking. Halvor followed this, and when evening drew near, he saw a big castle far away in the distance, and there were lights in it. So, as he had now been walking the whole day, and had not brought anything to eat away with him, he was frightfully hungry. Nevertheless, the nearer he came to the castle, the more afraid he was. A fire was burning in the castle, and Halvor went into the kitchen, which was more magnificent than any kitchen he had ever yet beheld. There were vessels of gold and silver, but not one human being was to be seen. When Halvor had stood there for some time, and no one had come out, he went in and opened a door, and inside a princess was sitting at her wheel spinning. "Nay," she cried, "can Christian folk dare to come hither? But the best thing that you can do is to go away again, for if not, the troll will devour you. A troll with 3 heads lives here. I should have been just as well pleased if he had had 4 heads more, for I should have enjoyed seeing the fellow," said the youth. "And I won't go away, for I have done no harm, but you must give me something to eat, for I am frightfully hungry." When Halvor had eaten his fill, the princess told him to try if he could wield the sword which was hanging on the wall. But he could not wield it, nor could he even lift it up. "Well then, you must take a drink out of that bottle which is hanging by its side, for that's what the troll does whenever he goes out and wants to use the sword," said the princess. Halvor took a draught, and in a moment he was able to swing the sword about with perfect ease. And now he thought it was high time for the troll to make his appearance, and at that very moment he came, panting for breath. Halvor got behind the door. "Hootetu," said the troll as he put his head in at the door. "It smells just as if there were Christian man's blood here." "Yes, you shall learn that there is," said Halvor, and cut off all his heads. The princess was so rejoiced to be free that she danced and sang. But then she remembered her sisters, and said, "If my sisters were but free too." "Where are they?" asked Halvor. So she told him where they were. One of them had been taken away by a troll to his castle, which was 6 miles off, and the other had been carried off to a castle which was 9 miles farther off still. "But now," said she, "you must first help me to get this dead body away from here." Halvor was so strong that he cleared everything away and made all clean and tidy very quickly. So then they ate and drank and were happy. And next morning he set off in the grey light of dawn. He gave himself no rest, but walked or ran the livelong day. When he came in sight of the castle, he was again just a little afraid. It was much more splendid than the other, but here, too, there was not a human being to be seen. So Halvor went into the kitchen and did not linger there either, but went straight in. "Nay, do Christian folk dare to come here?" cried the second princess. "I know not how long it is since I myself came, but during all that time I have never seen a Christian man. It will be better for you to depart at once, for a troll lives here who has 6 heads. "No, I shall not go," said Halvor. "Even if he had 6 more, I would not." "He will swallow you up alive," said the princess. But she spoke to no purpose, for Halvor would not go. He was not afraid of the troll, but he wanted some meat and drink, for he was hungry after his journey. So she gave him as much as he would have, and then she once more tried to make him go away. "No," said Halvor, "I will not go, for I have not done anything wrong, and I have no reason to be afraid." "He won't ask any questions about that," said the princess, "for he will take you without leave or right. But as you will not go, try if you can wield that sword which the troll uses in battle." He could not brandish the sword, so the princess said that he was to take a draught from the flask which hung by its side, and when he had done that he could wield the sword. Soon afterwards the troll came, and he was so large and stout that he was forced to go sideways to get through the door. When the troll got his first head in, he cried, "Hutetu! It smells of a Christian man's blood here." With that, Halvor cut off the first head, and so on with all the rest. The princess was now exceedingly delighted, but then she remembered her sisters and wished that they too were free. Halvor thought that might be managed, and wanted to set off immediately, but first he had to help the princess to remove the troll's body, so it was not until morning that he set forth on his way. It was a long way to the castle, and he both walked and ran to get there in time. Late in the evening he caught sight of it, and it was very much more magnificent than either of the others. And this time he was not in the least afraid, but went into the kitchen, and then straight on inside the castle. There a princess was sitting who was so beautiful that there was never anyone to equal her. She too said what the others had said, that no Christian folk had ever been there since she had come, and entreated him to go away again, or else the troll would swallow him up alive. The troll had 9 heads, she told him. Yes, and if he had 9 added to the 9, and then 9 more still, I would not go away, said Halvor, and went and stood by the stove. The princess begged him very prettily to go, lest the troll should devour him. But Halvor said, "Let him come when he will." So she gave him the troll's sword, and bade him take a drink from the flask to enable him to wield it. At that same moment the troll came, breathing hard, and he was ever so much bigger and stouter than either of the others, and he too was forced to go sideways to get in through the door. "Hutetu, what a smell of Christian blood there is here," said he. Then Halvor cut off the first head, and after that the others. But the last was the toughest of them all, and it was the hardest work that Halvor had ever done to get it off, but he still believed that he would have strength enough to do it. And now all the princesses came to the castle, and were together again, and they were happier than they had ever been in their lives. And they were delighted with Halvor, and he with them, and he was to choose the one he liked best. But of the 3 sisters, the youngest loved him best. But Halvor went about, and was so strange and so mournful and quiet, that the princesses asked what it was that he longed for, and if he did not like to be with them. He said that he did like to be with them, for they had enough to live on, and he was very comfortable there. But he longed to go home, for his father and mother were alive, and he had a great desire to see them again. They thought that this might easily be done. "You shall go and return in perfect safety if you will follow our advice," said the princesses. So he said that he would do nothing that they did not wish. Then they dressed him so splendidly that he was like a king's son, and they put a ring on his finger, and it was one which would enable him to go there and back again by wishing. But they told him that he must not throw it away or name their names, for if he did, all his magnificence would be at an end, and then he would never see them more. "If I were but at home again, or if home were but here," said Halvor, and no sooner had he wished this than it was granted. Halvor was standing outside his father and mother's cottage before he knew what he was about. The darkness of night was coming on, and when the father and mother saw such a splendid and stately stranger walk in, they were so startled that they both began to bow and curtsy. Halvor then inquired if he could stay there and have lodging for the night. No, that he certainly could not. "We can give you no such accommodation," they said, "for we have none of the things that are needful when a great lord like you is to be entertained. It will be better for you to go up to the farm. It is not far off. You can see the chimney pots from here, and there they have plenty of everything." Halvor would not hear of that. He was absolutely determined to stay where he was, but the old folks stuck to what they had said, and told him that he was to go to the farm, where he could get both meat and drink, whereas they themselves had not even a chair to offer him. "No," said Halvor, "I will not go up there till early tomorrow morning. Let me stay here tonight. I can sit down on the hearth." They could say nothing against that, so Halvor sat down on the hearth and began to rake about among the ashes, just as he had done before when he lay there idling away his time. They chattered much about many things, and told Halvor of this and of that, and at last he asked them if they had never had any child. Yes, they said. They had had a boy who was called Halvor, but they did not know where he had gone, and they could not even say whether he were dead or alive. "Could I be he?" said Halvor. "I should know him well enough," said the old woman, rising. "Our Halvor was so idle and slothful that he never did anything at all, and he was so ragged that one hole ran into another all over his clothes. Such a fellow as he was could never turn into such a man as you are." "Sir?" In a short time the old woman had to go to the fireplace to stir the fire, and when the blaze lit up, Halvor, as it used to do when he was at home raking up the ashes, she knew him again. "Good heavens, is that you, Halvor?" said she, and such great gladness fell on the old parents that there were no bounds to it, and now he had to relate everything that had befallen him, and the old woman was so delighted with him that she would take him up to the farm at once to show him to the girls who had formerly looked down on himself. She went there first, and Halvor followed her. When she got there, she told them how Halvor had come home again, and now they should just see how magnificent he was. "He looks like a prince," she said. "We shall see that he is just the same ragamuffin that he was before," said the girls, tossing their heads. At that same moment Halvor entered, and the girls were so astonished that they left their kirtles lying in the chimney corner and ran away in nothing but their petticoats. When they came in again they were so shamefaced that they hardly dared to look at Halvor, towards whom they had always been so proud and haughty before. "Ay, you have always thought that you were so pretty and dainty that no one was equal to you," said Halvor. "But you should just see the eldest princess whom I set free. You look like herds, women compared with her, and the second princess is also much prettier than you, but the youngest, who is my sweetheart, is more beautiful than either sun or moon. I wish to heaven they were here, and then you would see them." Scarcely had he said this before they were standing by his side. But then he was very sorrowful, for the words which they had said to him came to his mind. Up at the farm a great feast was made ready for the princesses, and much respect paid to them, but they would not stay there. "We want to go down to your parents," they said to Halvor, "so we will go out and look about us." He followed them out, and they came to a large pond outside the farmhouse. Very near the water there was a pretty green bank, and there the princesses said they would sit down and while away an hour, for they thought that it would be pleasant to sit and look out over the water. They said, there they sat down. And when they had sat for a short time, the youngest princess said, "I may as well comb your hair a little." "Halvor." So Halvor laid his head down on her lap, and she combed it, and it was not long before he fell asleep. Then she took her ring from him and put another in its place, and then she said to her sisters, "Hold me as I am holding you. I would that we were at Soria Moria castle." When Halvor awoke, he knew that he had lost the princesses, and began to weep and lament, and was so unhappy that he could not be comforted. In spite of all his father's and mother's entreaties, he would not stay, but bade them farewell, saying that he would never see them more, for if he did not find the princess again, he did not think it worth while to live. He again had $300, which he put into his pocket and went on his way. When he had walked some distance, he met a man with a tolerably good horse. Halvor longed to buy it, and began to bargain with the man. "Well, I have not exactly been thinking of selling him," said the man, "but if we could agree, perhaps." Halvor inquired how much he wanted to have for the horse. "I did not give much for him, and he is not worth much. He is a capital horse to ride, but good for nothing at drawing. But he will always be able to carry your bag of provisions, and you too, if you walk and ride by turns." At last they agreed about the price, and Halvor laid his bag on the horse, and sometimes he walked and sometimes he rode. In the evening he came to a green field, where stood a great tree, under which he seated himself. Then he let the horse loose and lay down to sleep, but before he did that, he took his bag off the horse. At daybreak he set off again, for he did not feel as if he could take any rest. So he walked and rode the whole day, through a great wood, where there were many green places which gleamed very prettily among the trees. He did not know where he was or whither he was going, but he never lingered longer in any place than was enough to let his horse get a little food when they came to one of these green spots, while he himself took out his bag of provisions. So he walked and he rode, and it seemed to him that the wood would never come to an end. But on the evening of the second day he saw a light shining through the trees. "If only there were some people up there, I might warm myself and get something to eat," thought Halvor. When he got to the place where the light had come from, he saw a wretched little cottage, and through a small pane of glass he saw a couple of old folks inside. They were very old, and as grey-headed as a pigeon, and the old woman had such a long nose that she sat in the chimney corner and used it to stir the fire. "Good evening, good evening," said the old hag. "But what errand have you that can bring you here? No Christian folk have been here for more than 100 years." So Halvor told her that he wanted to get to Soria Moria Castle, and inquired if she knew the way thither. "No," said the old woman, "that I do not, but the moon will be here presently, and I will ask her, and she will know. She can easily see it, for she shines on all things." So when the moon stood clear and bright above the tree-tops, the old woman went out. "Moon, moon," she screamed, Canst thou tell me the way to Moria Castle?" "No," said the moon, "that I can't, for when I shone there was a cloud before me." "Wait a little longer," said the old woman to Halvor, "for the west wind will presently be here, and he will know it, for he breathes gently or blows into every corner." "What? Have you a horse too?" she said when she came in again. "Oh, let the poor creature loose in our bit of fenced-in pasture, and don't let it stand there starving at our very door. But won't you exchange him with me? We have a pair of old boots here, with which you can go 15 quarters of a mile at each step. You shall have them for the horse, and then you will be able to get sooner to Moria Castle." Halvor consented to this at once, and the old woman was so delighted with the horse that she was ready to dance. "For now I, too, shall be able to ride to church," she said. Halvor could take no rest and wanted to set off immediately, but the old woman said that there was no need to hasten. "Lie down on the bench and sleep a little, for we have no bed to offer you," said she, "and I will watch for the coming of the west wind." Ere long came the west wind, roaring so loud that the walls creaked. The old woman went out and cried, West wind, canst thou tell me the way to Moria Castle? Here is one who would go thither." "Yes, I know it well," said the west wind. "I am just on my way there to dry the clothes for the wedding which is to take place. If he is fleet of foot, he can go with me." Out ran Halvor. "You will have to make haste if you mean to go with me," said the west wind, and away it went over hill and dale and moor and morass, and Halvor had enough to do to keep up with it. "Well, now I have no time to stay with you any longer," said the west wind, "for I must first go and tear down a bit of spruce fir before I go to the bleaching ground to dry the clothes. But just go along the side of the hill, and you will come to some girls who are standing there washing clothes, and then you will not have to walk far before you are at Moria Castle." Shortly afterwards, Halvor came to the girls who were standing washing, and they asked him if he had seen anything of the west wind, who was to come there to dry the clothes for the wedding. "Yes," said Halvor, "he has only gone to break down a bit of spruce fir. It won't be long before he is here." And then he asked them the way to Moria Castle. They put him in the right way, and when he came in front of the castle, it was so full of horses and people that it swarmed with them. But Halvor was so ragged and torn with following the west wind through bushes and bogs that he kept on one side, and would not go among the crowd until the last day, when the feast was to be held at noon. So when, as was the usage and custom, all were to drink to the bride and the young girls who were present, the cup-bearer filled the cup for each in turn, both bride and bridegroom, and knights and servants, and at last, after a very long time, he came to Halvor. He drank their health, and then slipped the ring which the princess had put on his finger when they were sitting by the waterside into the glass, and ordered the cup-bearer to carry the glass to the bride from him and greet her. Then the princess at once rose up from the table and said, "Who is most worthy to have one of us? He who has delivered us from the trolls, or he who is sitting here as bridegroom?" There could be but one opinion as to that, everyone thought, and when Halvor heard what they said, he was not long in flinging off his beggar's rags and arraying himself as a bridegroom. "Yes, he is the right one," cried the youngest princess when she caught sight of him. So she flung the other out of the window and held her wedding with Halvor, the Black Thief, a knight of the Glen. In times of yore there was a king and a queen in the south of Ireland who had 3 sons, all beautiful children, But the queen, their mother, sickened unto death when they were yet very young, which caused great grief throughout the court, particularly to the king, her husband, who could in no wise be comforted. Seeing that death was drawing near her, she called the king to her and spoke as follows: I am now going to leave you, and as you are young and in your prime, of course, after my death, you will marry again. Now all the request I ask of you is that you will build a tower in an island in the sea, wherein you will keep your 3 sons until they are come of age and fit to do for themselves, so that they may not be under the power or jurisdiction of any other woman. Neglect not to give them education suitable to their birth, and let them be trained up to every exercise and pastime requisite for kings' sons to learn. This is all I have to say, so farewell. The king had scarce time, with tears in his eyes, to assure her she should be obeyed in everything, when she, turning herself in her bed, with a smile, gave up the ghost. Never was greater mourning seen than was throughout the court and the whole kingdom, for a better woman than the queen, to rich and poor, was not to be found in the world. She was interred with great pomp and magnificence, and the king, her husband, became in a manner inconsolable for the loss of her. However, he caused the tower to be built and his sons placed in it under proper guardians according to his promise. In process of time, the lords and knights of the kingdom counselled the king as he was young to live no longer as he had done, but to take a wife. Which counsel prevailing, they chose him a rich and beautiful princess to be his consort, a neighbouring king's daughter, of whom he was very fond. Not long after, the queen had a fine son, which caused great feasting and rejoicing at the court, insomuch that the late queen, in a manner, was entirely forgotten. That fared well, and king and queen lived happy together for several years. At length the queen, having some business with the hen wife, went herself to her, and, after a long conference past, was taking leave of her, when the hen wife prayed that if ever she should come back to her again, she might break her neck. The queen, greatly incensed at such a daring insult from one of her meanest subjects, demanded immediately the reason, or she would have her put to death. It was worth your while, Madam, says the hen wife, to pay me well for it, for the reason I prayed so on, you concerns you much. What must I pay you? Asked the queen. You must give me, says she, the full of a pack of wool, and I have an ancient crock which you must fill with butter. Likewise a barrel which you must fill for me full of wheat. How much wool will it take to the pack? Says the queen. It will take 7 herds of sheep, said she, and their increase for 7 years. How much butter will it take to fill your crock? 7 dairies, said she, and their increase for 7 years. And how much will it take to fill the barrel you have? Says the queen. It will take the increase of 7 barrels of wheat for 7 years. That is a great quantity, says the queen, but the reason must be extraordinary, and before I want it, I will give you all you demand. Well, says the hen wife, it is because you are so stupid that you don't observe or find out those affairs that are so dangerous and hurtful to yourself and your child. What is that? Says the queen. Why, says she, the king, your husband, has 3 fine sons he had by the late queen, whom he keeps shut up in a tower until they come of age, intending to divide the kingdom between them, and let your son push his fortune. Now, if you don't find some means of destroying them, your child, and perhaps yourself, will be left desolate in the end. And what would you advise me to do? Said she. I am wholly at a loss in what manner to act in this affair. You must make known to the king, says the hen wife, that you heard of his sons, and wonder greatly that he concealed them all this time from you. Tell him you wish to see them, and that it is full time for them to be liberated, and that you would be desirous he would bring them to the court. The king will then do so, and there will be a great feast prepared on that account, and also diversions of every sort to amuse the people. And in these sports, said she, ask the king's sons to play a game at cards with you, which they will not refuse. Now, says the henwife, you must make a bargain that if you win, they must do whatever you command them, and if they win, that you must do whatever they command you to do. This bargain must be made before the assembly, and here is a pack of cards, says she, that I am thinking you will not lose by. The queen immediately took the cards, and, after returning the henwife thanks for her kind instruction, went back to the palace, where she was quite uneasy, until she got speaking to the king in regard of his children. At last, she broke it off to him in a very polite and engaging manner, so that he could see no muster or design in it. He readily consented to her desire, and his sons were sent for to the tower, who gladly came to court, rejoicing that they were freed from such confinement. They were all very handsome and very expert in all arts and exercises, so that they gained the love and esteem of all that had seen them. The queen, more jealous with them than ever, thought it an age until all the feasting and rejoicing was over, that she might get making her proposal, depending greatly on the power of the hen-wife's cards. At length this royal assembly began to sport and play at all kinds of diversions, and the queen very cunningly challenged the three princes to play at cards with her, making bargain with them as she had been instructed. They accepted the challenge, and the eldest son and she played the first game, which she won. Then the second son played, and she won that game likewise, the third son, and she then played the last game, and he won it, which sorely grieved her that she had not him in her power as well as the rest, being by far the handsomest and most beloved of the three. However, everyone was anxious to hear the queen's commands in regard to the two princes, not thinking that she had any ill design in her head against them. Whether it was the hen-wife instructed her, or whether it was from her own knowledge, I cannot tell, but she gave out they must go and bring her the knight of the Glen's wild steed of bells, or they should lose their heads. The young princes were not in the least concerned, not knowing what they had to do, but the whole court was amazed at her demand, knowing very well that it was impossible for them ever to get the steed, as all that ever sought him perished in the attempt. However, they could not retract the bargain, and the youngest prince was desired to tell what demand he had on the queen, as he had won his game. "My brothers," says he, "are now going to travel, and, as I understand, a perilous journey, wherein they know not what road to take or what may happen them. I am resolved, therefore, not to stay here, but to go with them, let what will betide, and I request and command, according to my bargain, that the queen shall stand on the highest tower of the palace until we come back, or find out that we are certainly dead, with nothing but sheaf corn for her food and cold water for her drink, if it should be for 7 years and longer." All things being now fixed, the three princes departed the court in search of the knight of the Glen's palace, and, travelling along the road, they came up with a man who was a little lame, and seemed to be somewhat advanced in years. They soon fell into discourse, and the youngest of the princes asked the stranger his name, or what was the reason he wore so remarkable a black cap as he saw on him. "I am called," said he, "the thief of Sloane, and sometimes the black thief from my cap," and so telling the prince the most of his adventures, he asked him again where they were bound for, or what they were about. The prince, willing to gratify his request, told him their affairs from the beginning to the end. "And now," said he, "we are travelling, and do not know whether we are on the right road or not. "Ah, my brave fellows," says the black thief, "you little know the danger you run. I am after that steed myself these 7 years, and can never steal him on account of a silk covering he has on him in the stable, with 60 bells fixed to it, and whenever you approach the place, he quickly observes it and shakes himself, which, by the sound of the bells, not only alarms the prince and his guards, but the whole country round, so that it is impossible ever to get him. And those that are so unfortunate as to be taken by the Knight of the Glen are boiled in a red-hot fiery furnace." "Bless me," says the young prince, "what will we do? If we return without the steed, we will lose our heads, so I see we are ill-fixed on both sides." "Well," says the Thief of Sloan, "if it were my case, I would rather die by the knight than by the wicked queen. Besides, I will go with you myself and show you the road, and whatever fortune you will have, I will take chance of the same." They returned him sincere thanks for his kindness, and he, being well acquainted with the road, in a short time brought them within view of the knight's castle. "Now," says he, "we must stay here till night comes, for I know all the ways of the place, and if there be any chance for it, it is when they are all at rest, for the steed is all the watch the knight keeps there." Accordingly, in the dead hour of the night, the king's 3 sons and the Thief of Sloan attempted the steed of bells in order to carry him away, but before they could reach the stables, the steed neighed most terribly and shook himself so, and the bells rung with such noise that the knight and all his men were up in a moment. The black thief and the king's sons thought to make their escape, but they were suddenly surrounded by the knight's guards and taken prisoners, where they were brought into that dismal part of the palace where the knight kept a furnace always boiling, in which he threw all offenders that ever came in his way, which in a few moments would entirely consume them. "Audacious villains," says the Knight of the Glen, "how dare you attempt so bold an action as to steal my steed? See, now, the reward of your folly. For your greater punishment, I will not boil you all together, but one after the other, so that he that survives may witness the dire afflictions of his unfortunate companions." So saying, he ordered his servants to stir up the fire. "We will boil the eldest looking of these. Young men first," said he, "and so on to the last, which will be this old champion with the black cap. He seems to be the captain, and looks as if he had come through many toils. I was as near death once as the prince is yet," says the black thief, "and escaped, and so will he too." "No, you never were," said the knight, "for he is within 2 or 3 minutes of his latter end." "But," says the black thief, "I was within 1 moment of my death, and I am here yet." "How was that?" says the knight. "I would be glad to hear it, for it seems impossible." "If you think, Sir Knight," says the black thief, "that the danger I was in surpasses that of this young man, will you pardon him his crime?" "I will," says the knight, "so go on with your story." "I was, sir," says he, "a very wild boy in my youth, and came through many distresses. Once in particular, as I was on my rambling, I was benighted and could find no lodging. At length I came to an old kiln, and being much fatigued, I went up and lay on the ribs. I had not been long there when I saw 3 witches coming in with 3 bags of gold. Each put their bags of gold under their heads, as if to sleep. I heard one of them say to the other that if the black thief came on them while they slept, he would not leave them a penny. I found by their discourse that everybody had got my name into their mouth, though I kept silent as death during their discourse. At length they fell fast asleep, and then I stole softly down, and seeing some turf convenient, I placed one under each of their heads, and off I went with their gold as fast as I could. I had not gone far, continued the Thief of Sloan, until I saw a grey hound, a hare, and a hawk in pursuit of me, and began to think it must be the witches that had taken the shapes, in order that I might not escape them unseen, either by land or water. Seeing they did not appear in any formidable shape, I was more than once resolved to attack them, thinking that with my broadsword I could easily destroy them. But considering again that it was perhaps still in their power to become alive again, I gave over the attempt and climbed with difficulty up a tree, bringing my sword in my hand and all the gold along with me. However, when they came to the tree, they found what I had done, and making further use of their hellish art, one of them was changed into a smith's anvil, and another into a piece of iron, of which the third soon made a hatchet. Having the hatchet made, she fell to cutting down the tree, and in the course of an hour it began to shake with me. At length it began to bend, and I found that 1 or 2 blows at the most would put it down. I then began to think that my death was inevitable, considering that those who were capable of doing so much would soon end my life. But just as she had the stroke drawn that would terminate my fate, the cock crew, and the witches disappeared, having resumed their natural shapes for fear of being known, and I got safe off with my bags of gold. Now, sir, says he to the knight of the Glen, if that be not as great an adventure as ever you heard, to be within 1 blow of a hatchet of my end, and that blow even drawn, and after all to escape, I leave it to yourself. Well, I cannot say, but it is very extraordinary, says the knight of the Glen, and on that account pardon this young man his crime, so stir up the fire till I boil this second one. Indeed, says the black thief, I would fain think he would not die this time either. How so? Says the knight. It is impossible for him to escape. I escaped death more wonderfully myself, says the Thief of Sloan, than if you had him ready to throw into the furnace, and I hope it will be the case with him likewise. Why, have you been in another great danger? Says the knight. I would be glad to hear the story too, and if it be as wonderful as the last, I will pardon this young man as I did the other. My way of living, sir, says the black thief, was not good, as I told you before, and being at a certain time fairly run out of cash, and meeting with no enterprise worthy of notice, I was reduced to great straits. At length a rich bishop died in the neighbourhood. I was then in, and I heard he was interred with a great deal of jewels and rich robes upon him, all which I intended in a short time to be master of. Accordingly, that very night I set about it, and coming to the place, I understood he was placed at the further end of a long dark vault, which I slowly entered. I had not gone in far, until I heard a foot coming towards me with a quick pace, and although naturally bold and daring, yet, thinking of the deceased bishop and the crime I was engaged in, I lost courage, and ran towards the entrance of the vault. I had retreated but a few paces when I observed, between me and the light, the figure of a tall black man standing in the entrance. Being in great fear, and not knowing how to pass, I fired a pistol at him, and he immediately fell across the entrance. Perceiving he still retained the figure of a mortal man, I began to imagine that it could not be the bishop's ghost. Recovering myself therefore from the fear I was in, I ventured to the upper end of the vault, where I found a large bundle, and upon further examination I found that the corpse was already rifled, and that which I had taken to be a ghost was no more than one of his own clergy. I was then very sorry that I had the misfortune to kill him, but it then could not be helped. I took up the bundle that contained everything belonging to the corpse that was valuable, intending to take my departure from this melancholy abode, But just as I came to the mouth of the entrance, I saw the guards of the place coming towards me, and distinctly heard them saying that they would look in the vault, for that the black thief would think little of robbing the corpse if he was anywhere in the place. I did not then know in what manner to act, for if I was seen, I would surely lose my life, as everybody had a look-out at that time, and because there was no person bold enough to come in on me. I knew very well on the first sight of me that could be got, I would be shot like a dog. However, I had not time to lose. I took and raised up the man which I had killed, as if he was standing on his feet, and I, crouching behind him, bore him up as well as I could, so that the guards readily saw him as they came up to the vault. Seeing the man in black, one of the men cried that was the black thief, and, presenting his piece, fired at the man, at which I let him fall, and crept into a little dark corner myself. That was at the entrance of the place. When they saw the man fall, they ran all into the vault, and never stopped until they were at the end of it, for fear, as I thought, that there might be some others along with him that was killed. But while they were busy inspecting the corpse and the vault to see what they could miss, I slipped out, and once away and still away, but they never had the black thief in their power since. "Well, my brave fellow," says the Knight of the Glen, "I see you have come through many dangers. You have freed these two princes by your stories, but I am sorry myself that this young prince has to suffer for all. Now, if you could tell me something as wonderful as you have told already, I would pardon him likewise. I pity this youth, and do not want to put him to death if I could help it." "That happens well," says the Thief of Sloan, "for I like him best myself, and have reserved the most curious passage for the last on his account." "Well then," says the knight, "let us hear it." "I was one day on my travels," says the black thief, "and I came into a large forest, where I wandered a long time, and could not get out of it. At length I came to a large castle, and fatigue obliged me to call in the same, where I found a young woman and a child sitting on her knee, and she crying. I asked her what made her cry, and where the lord of the castle was, for I wondered greatly that I saw no stir of servants or any person about the place. 'It is well for you,' says the young woman, 'that the lord of this castle is not at home at present, for he is a monstrous giant, with but one eye on his forehead, who lives on human flesh. He brought me this child,' says she. 'I do not know where he got it, and ordered me to make it into a pie, and I cannot help crying at the command.' I told her that if she knew of any place convenient, that I could leave the child safely, I would do it, rather than it should be killed by such a monster. She told me of a house, a distance off, where I would get a woman who would take care of it. But what will I do in regard of the pie? 'Cut a finger off it,' said I, 'and I will bring you in a young wild pig out of the forest, which you may dress as if it was the child, and put the finger in a certain place, that if the giant doubts anything about it, you may know where to turn it over at the first, and when he sees it he will be fully satisfied that the pie is made of the child.' She agreed to the scheme I proposed, and, cutting off the child's finger, by her direction I soon had it at the house she told me of, and brought her the little pig in the place of it. She then made ready the pie, and after eating and drinking heartily myself, I was just taking my leave of the young woman when we observed the giant coming through the castle gates. 'Dress me,' said she. 'What will you do now? Run away and lie down among the dead bodies that he has in the room, showing me the place. And strip off your clothes, that he may not know you from the rest if he has occasion to go that way.' I took her advice, and laid myself down among the rest, as if dead, to see how he would behave. The first thing I heard was him calling for his pie. When she set it down before him, he swore. It smelled like swine's flesh. But knowing where to find the finger, she immediately turned it up, which fairly convinced him of the contrary. The pie only served to sharpen his appetite, and I heard him sharpening his knife and saying he must have a collop or two, for he was not near satisfied. But what was my terror when I heard the giant groping among the bodies, and, fancying myself, cut the half of my hip off, and took it with him to be roasted. You may be certain I was in great pain, but the fear of being killed prevented me from making any complaint. However, when he had eaten all, he began to drink hot liquors in great abundance, so that in a short time he could not hold up his head, but threw himself on a large creel he had made for the purpose, and fell fast asleep. When I heard him snoring, as I went up and caused the woman to bind my wound with a handkerchief, and, taking the giant's spit, reddened it in the fire, and ran it through the eye, but was not able to kill him. However, I left the spit sticking in his head and took to my heels, but I soon found he was in pursuit of me, although blind, and having an enchanted ring, he threw it at me, and it fell on my big toe and remained fastened to it. The giant then called to the ring where it was, and to my great surprise it made him answer on my foot, and he, guided by the same, made a leap at me which I had the good luck to observe, and fortunately escaped the danger. However, I found running was of no use in saving me, as long as I had the ring on my foot. So I took my sword and cut off the toe it was fastened on, and threw both into a large fish pond that was convenient. The giant called again to the ring, which by the power of enchantment always made him answer. But he, not knowing what I had done, imagined it was still on some part of me, and made a violent leap to seize me, when he went into the pond over head and ears, and was drowned. "Now, Sir Knight," says the thief of Sloane, "you see what dangers I came through, and always escaped, but, indeed, I am lame for the want of my toe ever since." "My lord and master," says an old woman that was listening all the time, "that story is but too true, as I well know, for I am the very woman that was in the giant's castle, and you, my lord, the child that I was to make into a pie, and this is the very man that saved your life, which you may know by the want of your finger that was taken off, as you have heard, to deceive the giant." The Knight of the Glen, greatly surprised at what he had heard the old woman tell, and knowing he wanted his finger from his childhood, began to understand that the story was true enough. "And is this my deliverer?" says he. "O brave fellow, I not only pardon you all, but will keep you with myself while you live, where you shall feast like princes, and have every attendance that I have myself." They all returned thanks on their knees, and the black thief told him the reason they attempted to steal the steed of bells, and the necessity they were under in going home. "Well," says the Knight of the Glen, "if that's the case, I bestow you my steed, rather than this brave fellow should die, so you may go when you please. Only remember to call and see me betimes, that we may know each other well." They promised they would, and with great joy they set off for the king their father's palace, and the black thief along with them. The wicked queen was standing all this time on the tower, and, hearing the bells ringing at a great distance off, knew very well it was the princes coming home, and the steed with them, and through spite and vexation precipitated herself from the tower, and was shattered to pieces. The three princes lived happy and well during their father's reign, and always keeping the black thief along with them, but how they did after the old king's death is not known. The death of Koshche the Deathless. In a certain kingdom there lived a Prince Ivan. He had 3 sisters. The first was the Princess Moria, the second the Princess Olga, the third the Princess Anna. When their father and mother lay at the point of death, they had thus enjoined their son, Give your sisters in marriage to the very first suitors who come to woo them. Don't go keeping them by you." They died, and the prince buried them. And then, to solace his grief, he went with his sisters into the garden green to stroll. Suddenly, the sky was covered by a black cloud. A terrible storm arose. "Let us go home, sisters," he cried. Hardly had they got into the palace when the thunder pealed, the ceiling split open, and into the room where they were came flying a falcon bright. The falcon smote upon the ground, became a brave youth, and said, "Hail, Prince Ivan! Before I came as a guest, but now I have come as a wooer. I wish to propose for your sister, the Princess Moria. If you find favor in the eyes of my sister, I will not interfere with her wishes. Let her marry you, in God's name." The Princess Moria gave her consent. The falcon married her and bore her away into his own realm. Days follow days, hours chase hours, a whole year goes by. One day Prince Ivan and his two sisters went out to stroll in the garden green. Again there arose a storm cloud, with whirlwind and lightning. "Let us go home." "Sisters!" cries the prince. Scarcely had they entered the palace when the thunder crashed. The roof burst into a blaze, the ceiling split in twain, and in flew an eagle. The eagle smote upon the ground and became a brave youth. "Hail, Prince Ivan! Before I came as a guest, but now I have come as a wooer." And he asked for the hand of the Princess Olga. Prince Ivan replied, "If you find favor in the eyes of the Princess Olga, then let her marry you. I will not interfere with her liberty of choice." The Princess Olga gave her consent and married the eagle. The eagle took her and carried her off to his own kingdom. Another year went by. Prince Ivan said to his youngest sister, "Let us go out and stroll in the garden green." They strolled about for a time. Again there arose a storm cloud, with whirlwind and lightning. "Let us return home, sister," said he. They returned home, but they hadn't had time to sit down when the thunder crashed, the ceiling split open, and in flew a raven. The raven smote upon the floor and became a brave youth. The former youths had been handsome, but this one was handsomer still. "Well, Prince Ivan, before I came as a guest, but now I have come as a wooer. Give me the Princess Anna to wife. I won't interfere with my sister's freedom. If you gain her affections, let her marry you." So the Princess Anna married the raven, and he bore her away into his own realm. Prince Ivan was left alone. A whole year he lived without his sisters. Then he grew weary and said, "I will set out in search of my sisters." He got ready for the journey. He rode, and one day he saw a whole army lying dead on the plain. He cried aloud, "If there be a living man there, let him make answer." "Who has slain this mighty host?" There replied unto him, "A living man. All this mighty host has been slain by the fair Princess Maria Morevna." Prince Ivan rode further on, and came to a white tent, and forth came to meet him the fair Princess Maria Morevna. "Hail, Prince," says she, "whither does God send you? And is it of your free will or against your will?" Prince Ivan replied, "Not against their will do brave youths ride." "Well, if your business be not pressing, tarry a while in my tent." Thereat was Prince Ivan glad. He spent 2 nights in the tent, and he found favor in the eyes of Maria Morevna, and she married him. The fair princess, Maria Morevna, carried him off into her own realm. They spent some time together, and then the princess took it into her head to go a-warring. So she handed over all the housekeeping affairs to Prince Ivan and gave him these instructions: "Go about everywhere, Keep watch over everything. Only do not venture to look into that closet there." He couldn't help doing so. The moment Maria Morevna had gone, he rushed to the closet, pulled open the door, and looked in. There hung Koshche the Deathless, fettered by 12 chains. Then Koshche entreated Prince Ivan, saying, "Have pity upon me and give me to drink. 10 years long have I been here in torment, neither eating nor drinking. My throat is utterly dried up." The prince gave him a bucketful of water. He drank it up and asked for more, saying, "A single bucket of water will not quench my thirst. Give me more." The prince gave him a second bucketful. Koshche drank it up and asked for a third. And when he had swallowed the third bucketful, he regained his former strength, gave his chains a shake, and broke all 12 at once. "Thanks, Prince Ivan," cried Koshche the Deathless. "Now you will sooner see your own ears than Maria Morevna." And out of the window he flew in the shape of a terrible whirlwind, and he came up with the fair Princess Maria Morevna as she was going her way, laid hold of her, and carried her off home with him. But Prince Ivan wept full sore, and he arrayed himself and set out a-wandering, saying to himself, "Whatever happens, I will go and look for Maria Morevna." One day passed. Another day passed. At the dawn of the third day he saw a wondrous palace, and by the side of the palace stood an oak, and on the oak sat a falcon bright. Down flew the falcon from the oak, smote upon the ground, turned into a brave youth, and cried aloud, "Ha, dear brother-in-law, how deals the Lord with you?" Out came running the Princess Maria, joyfully greeted her brother Ivan, and began inquiring after his health, and telling him all about herself. The prince spent 3 days with them. Then he said, "I cannot abide with you. I must go in search of my wife, the fair Princess Maria Morevna." "Hard will it be for you to find her," answered the falcon. "At all events, leave with us your silver spoon. We will look at it and remember you." So Prince Ivan left his silver spoon at the falcon's and went on his way again. On he went one day, on he went another day, and by the dawn of the third day he saw a palace, still grander than the former one, and hard by the palace stood an oak, and on the oak sat an eagle. Down flew the eagle from the oak, smote upon the ground, turned into a brave youth, and cried aloud, "Rise up, Princess Olga! Hither comes our brother dear." The Princess Olga immediately ran to meet him, and began kissing him and embracing him, asking after his health, and telling him all about herself. With them, Prince Ivan stopped 3 days. Then he said, "I cannot stay here any longer. I am going to look for my wife, the fair Princess Maria Morevna." "Hard will it be for you to find her," replied the eagle. "Leave with us a silver fork. We will look at it and remember you." He left a silver fork behind and went his way. He travelled 1 day, he travelled 2 days. At daybreak on the third day, he saw a palace grander than the first 2, and near the palace stood an oak, and on the oak sat a raven. Down flew the raven from the oak, smote upon the ground, turned into a brave youth, and cried aloud, "Princess Anna, come forth quickly. Our brother is coming." Out ran the Princess Anna, greeted him joyfully, and began kissing and embracing him, asking after his health, and telling him all about herself. Prince Ivan stayed with them 3 days. Then he said, "Farewell. I am going to look for my wife, the fair Princess Maria Morevna." "Hard will it be for you to find her," replied the raven. "Anyhow, leave your silver snuff-box with us. We will look at it and remember you." The prince handed over his silver snuff-box, took his leave, and went his way. One day he went, another day he went, and on the third day he came to where Maria Morevna was. She caught sight of her love, flung her arms around his neck, burst into tears, and exclaimed, "Oh, Prince Ivan, Why did you disobey me and go looking into the closet and letting out Koshche the Deathless? Forgive me, Maria Morevna. Remember not the past. Much better fly with me while Koshche the Deathless is out of sight. Perhaps he won't catch us." So they got ready and fled. Now Koshche was out hunting. Towards evening he was returning home, when his good steed stumbled beneath him. "Why stumblest thou, sorry jade? Scentest thou some ill?" The steed replied, "Prince Ivan has come and carried off Maria Morevna. Is it possible to catch them?" "It is possible to sow wheat, to wait till it grows up, to reap it and thresh it, to grind it to flour, to make 5 pies of it, to eat those pies, and then to start in pursuit, and even then to be in time." Koshche galloped off and caught up Prince Ivan. "Now," says he, "this time I will forgive you, in return for your kindness in giving me water to drink. And a second time I will forgive you, but the third time, beware, I will cut you to bits." Then he took Maria Morevna from him and carried her off. But Prince Ivan sat down on a stone and burst into tears. He wept and then returned back again to Maria Morevna. Now Koshche the Deathless happened not to be at home. "Let us fly, Maria Morevna." "Ah, Prince Ivan." "He will catch us." "Suppose he does catch us. At all events we shall have spent an hour or 2 together." So they got ready and fled. As Koshche the Deathless was returning home, his good steed stumbled beneath him. "Why stumblest thou, sorry jade? Scentest thou some ill? Prince Ivan has come and carried off Maria Morevna. Is it possible to catch them? It is possible to sow barley, to wait till it grows up, to reap it and thresh it, to brew beer, to drink ourselves drunk on it, to sleep our fill, and then to set off in pursuit, and yet to be in time." Koshche galloped off, caught up Prince Ivan. "Didn't I tell you that you should not see Maria Morevna any more than your own ears?" And he took her away and carried her off home with him. Prince Ivan was left there alone. He wept and wept. Then he went back again after Maria Morevna. Koshche happened to be away from home at that moment. "Let us fly." "Maria Morevna." "Ah, Prince Ivan, he is sure to catch us and hew you in pieces." "Let him hew away." "I cannot live without you." So they got ready and fled. Koshche the Deathless was returning home when his good steed stumbled beneath him. "Why stumblest thou? Scentest thou any ill?" "Prince Ivan has come and has carried off Maria Morevna." Koshche galloped off, caught Prince Ivan, chopped him into little pieces, put them into a barrel, smeared it with pitch, and bound it with iron hoops, and flung it into the blue sea. But Maria Morevna he carried off home. At that very time the silver articles turned black, which Prince Ivan had left with his brothers-in-law. "Ah," said they, "the evil is accomplished, sure enough." Then the eagle hurried to the blue sea, caught hold of the barrel, and dragged it ashore. The falcon flew away for the water of life, and the raven for the water of death. Afterwards they all 3 met, broke open the barrel, took out the remains of Prince Ivan, washed them, and put them together in fitting order. The raven sprinkled them with the water of death. The pieces joined together, the body became whole. The falcon sprinkled it with the water of life. Prince Ivan shuddered, stood up, and said, "Ah, what a time I've been sleeping." "You'd have gone on sleeping a good deal longer if it hadn't been for us," replied his brothers-in-law. "Now come and pay us a visit." "Not so, brothers. I shall go and look for Maria Morevna." And when he had found her, he said to her, "Find out from Koshche the Deathless whence he got so good a steed." So Maria Morevna chose a favorable moment and began asking Koshche about it. Koshche replied, "Beyond thrice 9 lands, in the 30th kingdom, on the other side of the fiery river, there lives a Baba Yaga. She has so good a mare that she flies right round the world on it every day. And she has many other splendid mares. I watched her herds for 3 days without losing a single mare. And in return for that, the Baba Yaga gave me a foal. But how did you get across the fiery river? Why, I've a handkerchief of this kind. When I wave it thrice on the right hand, there springs up a very lofty bridge, and the fire cannot reach it." Maria Morevna listened to all this and repeated it to Prince Ivan, and she carried off the handkerchief and gave it to him. So he managed to get across the fiery river, and then went on to the Baba Yaga's. Long went he on, without getting anything either to eat or to drink. At last he came across an outlandish bird and its young ones. Says Prince Ivan, "I'll eat one of these chickens." "Don't eat it, Prince Ivan," begs the outlandish bird. "Some time or other I'll do you a good turn." He went on farther and saw a hive of bees in the forest. "I'll get a bit of honeycomb," says he. "Don't disturb my honey, Prince Ivan," exclaims the queen bee. "Some time or other I'll do you a good turn." So he didn't disturb it, but went on. Presently there met him a lioness with her cub. "Anyhow, I'll eat this lion cub," says he. "I'm so hungry I feel quite unwell." "Please let us alone, Prince Ivan," begs the lioness. "Some time or other I'll do you a good turn." "Very well, have it your own way," says he. Hungry and faint he wandered on, walked farther and farther, and at last came to where stood the house of the Baba Yaga. Round the house were set 12 poles in a circle, and on each of 11 of these poles was stuck a human head. The 12th alone remained unoccupied. "Hail, Granny!" "Hail, Prince Ivan! Wherefore have you come? Is it of your own accord or on compulsion? I have come to earn from you an heroic steed." "So be it, Prince. You won't have to serve a year with me, but just 3 days. If you take good care of my mares, I'll give you an heroic steed. But if you don't, why, then you mustn't be annoyed at finding your head stuck on top of the last pole up there." Prince Ivan agreed to these terms. The Baba Yaga gave him food and drink, and bade him set about his business. But the moment he had driven the mares afield, they cocked up their tails, and away they tore across the meadows in all directions. Before the prince had time to look round, they were all out of sight. Thereupon he began to weep and to disquiet himself, and then he sat down upon a stone and went to sleep. But when the sun was near its setting, the outlandish bird came flying up to him and awakened him, saying, "Arise, Prince Ivan, the mares are at home now." The prince arose and returned home. There the Baba Yaga was storming and raging at her mares, and shrieking, "Whatever did you come home for?" "How could we help coming home?" said they. "There came flying birds from every part of the world, and all but pecked our eyes out." "Well, well, tomorrow don't go galloping over the meadows, but disperse amid the thick forests." Prince Ivan slept all night. In the morning, the Baba Yaga says to him, "Mind, Prince, if you don't take good care of the mares, if you lose merely one of them, your bold head will be stuck on that pole." He drove the mares afield. Immediately they cocked up their tails and dispersed among the thick forests. Again did the prince sit down on the stone, weep, and then go to sleep. The sun went down behind the forest. Up came running the lioness. "Arise, Prince Ivan, the mares are all collected." Prince Ivan arose and went home. More than ever did the Baba Yaga storm at her mares and shriek, "Whatever did ye come back home for? How could we help coming back? Beasts of prey came running at us from all parts of the world. and all but tore us utterly to pieces. Well, tomorrow run off into the blue sea." Again did Prince Ivan sleep through the night. Next morning the Baba Yaga sent him forth to watch the mares. "If you don't take good care of them," says she, "your bowed head will be stuck on that pole." He drove the mares afield. Immediately they cocked up their tails, disappeared from sight, and fled into the blue sea. There they stood, up to their necks in water. Prince Ivan sat down on the stone, wept, and fell asleep. But when the sun had set behind the forest, up came flying a bee and said, "Arise, Prince, the mares are all collected. But when you get home, don't let the Baba Yaga set eyes on you, but go into the stable and hide behind the mangers. There you will find a sorry coat rolling in the muck. Do you steal it, and at the dead of night ride away from the house?" Prince Ivan arose, slipped into the stable, and lay down behind the mangers. While the Baba Yaga was storming away at her mares and shrieking, "Why did ye come back?" How could we help coming back? There came flying bees in countless numbers from all parts of the world, and began stinging us on all sides till the blood came. The Baba Yaga went to sleep. In the dead of the night, Prince Ivan stole the sorry coat, saddled it, jumped on its back, and galloped away to the fiery river. When he came to that river, he waved the handkerchief 3 times on the right hand, and suddenly, springing goodness knows whence, there hung across the river, high in the air, a splendid bridge. The prince rode across the bridge and waved the handkerchief twice. Only on the left hand there remained across the river a thin, ever so thin, a bridge. When the Baba Yaga got up in the morning, the sorry colt was not to be seen. Off she set in pursuit. At full speed did she fly in her iron mortar, urging it on with the pestle, sweeping away her traces with the broom. She dashed up to the fiery river, gave a glance, and said, "A capital bridge." She drove on to the bridge, but had only got halfway when the bridge broke in 2, and the Baba Yaga went flop into the river. There truly did she meet with a cruel death. Prince Ivan fattened up the colt in the green meadows, and it turned into a wondrous steed. Then he rode to where Marya Morevna was. She came running out and flung herself on his neck, crying, "By what means has God brought you back to life?" "Thus and thus," says he. "Now come along with me." "I'm afraid, Prince Ivan, if Koshche catches us, you will be cut in pieces again." "No, he won't catch us. I have a splendid heroic steed now. It flies just like a bird." So they got on its back and rode away. Koshche the Deathless was returning home when his horse stumbled beneath him. "What art thou stumbling for? Sorry, jade? Dost thou scent any ill? Prince Ivan has come and carried off Marya Morevna. Can we catch them? God knows. Prince Ivan has a horse now which is better than I." "Well, I can't stand it," says Koshche the Deathless. "I will pursue." After a time, he came up with Prince Ivan, lighted on the ground, and was going to chop him up with his sharp sword. But at that moment, Prince Ivan's horse smote Koshche the Deathless full swing with its hoof, and cracked his skull, and the prince made an end of him with a club. Afterwards the prince heaped up a pile of wood, set fire to it, burnt Koshche the Deathless on the pyre, and scattered his ashes to the wind. Then Marya Morevna mounted Koshche's horse, and Prince Ivan got on his own, and they rode away to visit first the raven, and then the eagle, and then the falcon. Wherever they went, they met with a joyful greeting. "Ah, Prince Ivan! Why, we never expected to see you again. Well, it wasn't for nothing that you gave yourself so much trouble. Such a beauty as Marya Morevna, one might search for all the world over and never find one like her." And so they visited, and they feasted, and afterwards they went off to their own realm.